enough? I will not repeat, he knows that game. I'm sorry?
It turned off.
At this point, I will ask that we do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask Mr. Barbos if you'd lead it, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Steve. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and call for roll call, please.
Commissioner Barbos?
Here.
Commissioner McDonald?
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Here.
Commissioner Willers?
Here.
And Chair Wellender.
Here. All right, we move to the point in the meeting where if anyone would like to come forward and speak on any item that is not on the agenda this evening, be advised that we would not be able to take any action on it, but we will listen. And if you do come forward, please state your name and address, and the microphone is yours at this point. And I'm seeing no movement, so we're going to slip on down to back to my commissioners for the review and acceptance of agenda as written.
I move.
I second. All right, roll call. Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Willers?
Yes.
And Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Staff, any correspondence, late correspondence?
No late correspondence was received.
All right, then we're going to slip down to the consent calendar, and we have two items which are drafts of some previous meeting notes. Do we have any comments in regarding that, or anybody want to pull any of it?
I have to excuse myself from one of them, but I'm trying to remember which one I missed. So if anybody can help refresh my memory. Okay, the 16th, so I'll skip that one.
Okay. But if we don't pull them off the consent, that means,
Yep, through the chair, actually, you don't need to recuse if you weren't at the meeting. You could still vote on the minutes, or you could pull both of them off the consent calendar and vote on them separately.
well, if we have no comments that justify being pulled off consent, I'd suggest we keep them on consent. And my only comment of record is just simply, from my perspective, action minutes have minimal value. So I'm continue to cry out for what I call the old-fashioned meeting minutes. So with that, do I have a motion? Do I need a motion for the consent?
Make a motion to adopt the consent calendar as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Willers?
Yes.
And Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
All right. Now we're going to move into the public hearings portion of this evening, and it's going to be bringing up item 7.1, which will be basically a review of the draft of the housing element. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Wellender and members of the commission. At this time, I'd like to introduce Perry Banner from DeNova Group, Planning Group. He's going to be giving a presentation tonight, and he will be able to answer any questions that you have. Thank you. Hi, Perry. You can take it over.
Hi, Wendy. How are you doing tonight? Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Wendy, I'm thinking that I'm going to have the ability to share my screen. Is that correct? Perfect. So let me just do that. Wonderful. So I'm hoping that everyone can see the screen in front of you, or in front of me rather. As I mentioned, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. although my colleague Beth is the one that's sort of taking the lead on this particular project, she did have a conflict tonight, asked me to stand in. It's, I think that I may not have as intimate a understanding of the project as Beth does, but I think that I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have or members or from members of the public. But of course, this is the topic of discussion tonight is the public review of the draft housing element and planning for housing in Sonoma. I'm going to revisit this project timeline at the end of the presentation, but just very quickly to give you a taste of where we are. So we're officially in the public review phase of the draft housing element. It's a 30-day review period, so that'll take us through to the beginning of September, after which time we'll send the document off to the state, to the Department of Housing and Community Development for its review. The state will, HCD rather, will typically will provide us with a findings letter to maybe identify some revisions that'll need to be made to the housing element. So we'll do that in preparation for the adoption hearings. So this isn't the last time that the Planning Commission is going to see this document or be presented with the housing element. When it comes time for adoption in early 2023, January, the Planning Commission will be able to revisit the documents and then make a recommendation to City Council for adoption. So just very quickly, the housing element that you have before you consists really of two parts. It consists of the housing plan, which is really the city's strategy for how it's going to accommodate the city's housing needs over the planning period 2023 through 2031. It outlines the goals, policies, and all the implementation programs to meet those housing needs. And the other part is the background report, which is kind of the meat of the housing element. It provides the housing needs assessments, a review of governmental and non-governmental constraints, identifies resources that the city has to produce housing, including a sites inventory. And finally, what's new for this housing element cycle is this more robust analysis of fair housing, which we call AFFH, or Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. So I know that the Planning Commission's already had a joint study session with Council, and you talked a little bit about regional housing needs and the regional housing needs allocation arena. But I wanted to give you a quick refresher before we got into the housing element a little bit. So as the Planning Commission knows, you're the City of Sonoma, rather, is a member of the Association of Bay Area Governments. And that body is the body that creates the methodology for distributing this regional housing needs allocation, or the city's fair share of housing. And that methodology takes into consideration growth rates in Sonoma, income levels, equity, access to resources and opportunities, and proximity to jobs. And of course, this regional housing needs allocation is the amount of housing that each jurisdiction in California must plan for over this upcoming housing element cycle. So the city's arena for that planning period, 2023 through 2031, is 311 units. And these units are broken down into income levels. And as you can see, that 311 gets broken down into lower income units, the very low and low income, moderate income, and finally the market rate or above moderate income units. And what I want to make clear is that what the city needs to do is demonstrate that there's realistic capacity in Sonoma to accommodate this arena, but the city is not responsible for building the housing itself. That's left to the free market. And in the last cycle, the fifth cycle housing element, the city did a great job of meeting its arena, and in fact exceeding its arena. So the city in the fifth cycle housing elements was allocated 137 units, and to date 160 units, or 166 units rather, have been permitted for this fifth cycle, which ends in 2023. And those units that were permitted include 93 multifamily units and 37 ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. So how do we meet Sonoma's housing needs for this cycle? So as I mentioned, the city is not required to actually build the housing, right? We kind of set the table for development to occur. But we need to demonstrate that there's enough land and that there's zoning in place with suitable densities to accommodate that arena. And often the most challenging part of all this is actually identifying where those sites are going to be. You may have taken note from the two previous tables that the city for this cycle was allocated 311 units, which is almost 3 times the amount from previous cycles. And that's across the board for California. All these jurisdictions are receiving 3 to 4 times the amount of RHNA allocation that they would have received in previous housing element cycles. So what we do, we set the stage for housing developers to build projects that are in line with the general plan, the zoning ordinance, and any other planning documents. And if we don't have adequate sites, then we must develop a program to rezone for adequate sites within the next 3 years of the housing element adoption. And the good thing for Sonoma, and I will say that this isn't the case for a number of other jurisdictions, is that there is adequate land and adequate sites to accommodate the RHNA, and there is no rezoning that's being proposed for this housing element cycle. What we need to do, of course, is accommodate different types of households, some with special needs, different income levels. So we're providing a variety of housing. And of course, homes come in a variety of different scales and densities. We're giving you a little sampling of the types of housing that, that we want to accommodate. Different people, of course, are attracted to different types of housing. They're at different stages in their lives, so they have different lifestyles. So the community needs to provide for a variety of housing types. And in order for Sonoma to accommodate all types of households, the city needs housing options that attract a variety of people and income levels. Now, I know that this table is a little bit much to digest, so I'm going to step you through it. So the line at the top shows the breakdown of RHNA units, the 311 units that you saw in a previous table. It also shows units that have been approved in that projects that are going to be receive a certificate of occupancy after June 30th, 2022. 8 units fall into that category. There's also projects that are pending, projects that might be in a various state of review in the planning department or in building and safety. And those projects reflect another 144 units. So what we're allowed to do is take these units that amount to 152 units and apply them as credits to our RHNA. So we'll take those 152 units that are in the pipeline, subtract them from the 311, it still leaves us with a little bit of a gap. So those are the units that we have to accommodate for and to find sites for. So as I mentioned, the city is blessed in a way that there's vacant land that's available, there's underutilized sites that are available, so there's no need to propose at this point a rezoning of any kind. So what we've done in the sites inventory is that we've identified sites, vacant sites that can accommodate up to 257 units. We've also identified sites sites that are underutilized, so there might be a commercial development on those sites, but the zoning allows for residential uses. So we've identified another 102 units in the underutilized category that can be put towards our RHNA. And finally, we're projecting that over the planning period 2023 through 2031, that there'll be 64 accessory dwelling units that are constructed during that time. The ADUs are going to be constructed, we've anticipated, all at the moderate income level. So what we have on the bottom here is a total capacity, taking into account the credits, vacant land, underutilized land, of 579 units, which is in excess of our RHNA, which is a good thing. If we have this excess capacity, what that means is that when we send this document to HCD for review, it might be the case that HCD doesn't like one site. Maybe it finds that we haven't demonstrated that the site has the realistic potential of developing over the planning period. They might ask us to strike that site. So having this excess capacity, this little bit of a buffer, puts Sonoma in a good spot to actually accommodating its RENA. And the other thing too is that what we need to do as well is accommodate units at different income levels. So you can see, for example, on vacant sites, we're showing that we have capacity for 69 very low income dwelling units, and we've identified where those sites might be. It could be the case that then when that site develops, it doesn't actually develop with those very low income units. And so we'll need a little bit of room to make that up during the planning period. So that's why it's a good thing that we have excess capacity. So the map that you're seeing here identifies where those sites are in the city. There are these little polygons that are all numbered. Although with the color coding, it might not be too easy to see where they are. I'm going to show another map in a second that'll show the distribution. But what I can say is that the sites are in fact spread out throughout the city rather than concentrated in any one area. And these two maps, which are related to fair housing, again show the distribution of the sites. You can see that the distribution is pretty broad across the city. The map on the left shows the sites in relation to what we'll call the diversity index. The diversity index meaning census tracts with a high or low diversity of people of various ethnic backgrounds. The map on the right shows another map related to fair housing, which shows access to opportunities, and it again indicates that the sites are spread out throughout the city. In the case of Sonoma, Sonoma is largely considered an area with lower resources as far as having access to opportunities, but this whole effort is intended, this whole fair housing effort is intended to improve those access to opportunities. So finally, a little bit about the housing plan. As I mentioned, the housing plan ends up taking all that background information into consideration, then developing this strategy for how we're going to meet those housing needs. So the housing plan has goals and policies. The goals in the housing plan are largely similar to the goals from the previous housing element cycle. Not a whole lot has changed with regard to the goals. But I want to stop here for a second to just state philosophically, what the approach is in this housing element cycle. And this isn't just for Sonoma, it's really across all the jurisdictions in California. And what the intent this year, or for this cycle rather, is plan-wide. We need to make revisions to the policies, to the implementation programs, so that they really do encourage availability of affordable housing throughout the community, and to promote equitable access to areas of opportunity, to amenities, and housing at a range of affordability levels to affirmatively further fair housing. So that's philosophically what we're doing with this housing element cycle. I don't want to read these verbatim, but this is just going to be I want to demonstrate what we're doing with the housing programs. What we did with the housing programs is we took a look at what the city had in the fifth cycle. In the housing element itself, towards the back of the document, you'll see that there's an assessment of how the city did with its implementation programs. Some of these implementation programs are staying, some were cut, some get modified and massaged a little bit. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the revisions. Program 4 is revised to expand housing types. Program 5 is going to have the city revisit its ADU and JADU requirements to more actively promote accessory dwelling units and to track their affordability. Program 6 is going to establish an affordable housing impact fee to address demand for new single-family units and smaller residential projects. Program 5 really is intended to increase access to the Housing Choice Voucher Program and to make sure that it's dispersed throughout the city. Program 14 is going to have the city establish objective design standards and a streamlined permit process for qualified projects. what objective design standards are, and this is important for the Planning Commission because I know that you consider these projects. But what the state is requiring the city to do is to remove all that subjective language that might be applied to a project that requires a conditional use permit, for example, so that the requirements are very clear to the developer, that it kind of takes away the subjective nature of approval for a project. So the city is going to be required to establish these objective design standards. Program 15 will be amending the development code to address changes in state law specific to certain housing types and remove constraints that are identified in the housing element. Program 16, new program that's going to really monitor state law to ensure that the city's development processes are in compliance. Program 17 really is to make sure that the growth management ordinance doesn't conflict with the city's ability to accommodate its RENA. Program 19, which is the density bonus program, we've added some requirements, or rather we will be adding some requirements to the density bonus program and further incentivizing housing through that program. Program 21 is a new program, and this is related to affirmatively furthering fair housing. We're going to be taking steps for fair housing outreach and enforcement, to increase housing mobility, to improve access to opportunities, to make sure that there's place-based strategies for community preservation and revitalization, and to make sure that there's programs in place to protect against displacement of individuals as new housing is developed. Program 26, intended to increase access to affordable housing resources. Program 27, to ensure that there's no net loss of that inventory of sites. So as I mentioned, if a site that we've identified as for very low or low income does not develop as very low or very low income, then this program is going to ensure that we make that up somewhere along the planning period. And program 28 is to ensure that development of sites in the inventory includes replacement housing in the event that any housing is removed from the city's housing stock. So quickly, next steps. As I mentioned, we're going to revisit this timeline. So the city's, the housing element is due in January 2023. So this public review period will take us through to September 7th. There'll be an opportunity for members of the public, stakeholders, et cetera, to comment through that period. We'll send the document off to HCD for its potentially 90-day review period. We'll get that document back, make those changes that HCD has requested, set us up for adoption in January, and finally sending the document back to the state for certification in early 2023. And all along the way, there'll be opportunities for the public to comment on the process. So as I come to a close, I just want to remind the public that if you'd like to comment on the housing element, you can visit the city's website, identified here. There's also copies of the document that's available at City Hall and other locations. And that comments can be submitted by mail or email to Wendy Atkins at the address that you see here, or at the website that's identified. As well, probably the best thing that a member of the public can do is visit the website. The document is on the website, and you can peruse at your leisure, and then send any comments to Wendy, which will help respond to. And with that, I'm going to end the presentation and hopefully answer any questions that you might have.
Wendy, is this an opportunity for the public to ask any questions? So if we can hold back, then I'd like to invite the public to come forward and direct any questions or comments to our consultant Perry and or to our staff or the commissioners. So the podium is yours.
Here I go again. First name Robert, last name Frank, Larkin Drive. and I'm rather late in this curve of information, but there are 4 cornerstone questions I'd like to ask. One, who will the landlords be? Will there be the opportunity for owner occupancy, which is to say buying of these units by the occupants? Who is subsidizing and or financing this? And the 4th cornerstone question, will there be rent control? Thank you.
And through the chair, do you want the public to make their comments, and then afterwards the consultant can address any questions, or do you want him to do that?
Whatever Perry feels most comfortable with. I think it'd be good to recognize the questions that have been brought forth, and then if there needs to be a dialogue, by all means, with Perry or yourself.
All right, Perry, thank you.
Sure. So there was there were 4 questions there that I understood, and if I take them out of order, I missed one of them, please, by all means, let me know. So in the housing elements, in the back of the documents, under the sites inventory, there is a list of the sites. Ownership has been identified as far as those sites are concerned. So it is, in terms of who owns these properties that get identified under the sites inventory as opportunity sites, that information, we do have knowledge of that information. As far as the ability to own the units, so keep in mind this, is that, again, the city's role in this process is that we're essentially setting the table, like I say. So we are making sure that development can occur over the planning period, and then it's left up to the free market to actually build the units. So as those units are built, we're completely anticipating that some will be for rent and some will be for ownership. So there'll be a mix of both. And there'll be a mix of housing types too, right? It'll be multifamily, single family, ADUs, so various types of housing to accommodate all members of the community. With regard to rent control, that's not something that we've put into the housing element. I think that maybe someone from the city can weigh in on that. And I may have missed the 3rd question. If you could just remind me of what that one was.
Maybe who the landlords would be?
I think, as I said, the landlords are in fact identified in the site's inventory, and it's a broad spectrum of people.
Thank you.
There was a financing. Who's going to finance?
Okay.
Who's going to make the steamer trunks of cash available for this?
So the last question was who's going to finance it?
Okay, great. So what so keep this in mind, is that, again, what we're doing is making sure that the development can occur. Now that being, and then of course it gets left up to the free market, but also keep this in mind, is that what we're doing in this housing element cycle is really endeavoring to make sure that affordable housing is constructed. And so there are housing programs in the housing plan that are affordable housing related, programs that will have the city coordinating with developers, advocating and looking for funding to construct affordable housing. So there will be an effort on the city's part to secure funding for affordable housing. But as far, the city's not on the hook by any means to actually construct the housing. Again, that's going to get left to the free market.
Thank you, Perry.
You're welcome.
Chair Wellender, we have some comments on the Zoom.
Oh, okay. We'll start there and come back to the audience in just a minute then.
Caitlin Cornwell, you can go ahead and speak.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Caitlin.
thank you. Caitlin Cornwall. I just have a question of whether you considered seeking a pro-housing designation from the state of California, and why or why not seek that?
Caitlin, can you elaborate on that a little bit? What I will say is that I think we're demonstrating that, of course, we're pro-housing in the sense that we're making sure that there's sites that are available. The city will be putting forth a best effort to affirmatively further fair housing so that housing is available for across all income groups, people with special needs, etc.
Well,
City will be.
Yeah, what I'm referring to is a specific, relatively new set of criteria that the state has that can they can review a jurisdiction's policies and choose to designate a jurisdiction as a quote pro-housing jurisdiction, and that puts that jurisdiction near the top of the line in terms of receiving grant funding and other support from the state. The county is intending to become designated a pro-housing jurisdiction, for example.
Okay. Caitlin, if I could, so as I mentioned, my colleague Beth Thompson, who's kind of the lead on this project, is probably a little bit better versed in that. So if you would allow me to do this, I'll make sure that that question is referred to her, and we'll somehow manage to get a response back to you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Caitlin. Any more on the Zoom?
No.
Good. Then I'll bring it back to the audience. And would anyone else like to step forward and either raise a comment or a question regarding the housing element draft? Seeing no excitement. Come to the mic, please.
Excuse me again. Thanks for, a second opportunity to speak. Thank you. The devil's in the details, and I have not heard enough details.
Very good. Well, as was announced, this is simply, we're still in the draft form, and so we have the next, I believe, 30 days for public input. So hopefully you'll have the opportunity to either go online, or there is noted the locations, I believe it's the Finnage House, City Hall, and the library that have copies that hopefully the devil will be exposed. At this point, if I see nobody else from the audience, then I'm going to bring it back for comments and questions from the commissioners. Bob.
All right. Thank you so much. I just had some thoughts regarding the implementation of the housing element and what the city's responsibility is. There was a number of goals and policies elaborated on in specific programs and policies. So, for example, one was to create objective standards for development. And what is the performance standards for the housing element? What the state would look at in terms of we are actually implementing our housing element, and what would the timeline be, or our perceived timeline to be able to implement the housing element itself? For example, redoing our zoning code, developing objective design standards, all those things that are programs that the housing element is encouraging.
Great. Would you like me to answer that question then?
Sure.
Great. So let me say this: in the housing plan, under each one of those housing programs, there's a couple of things that get identified: the responsible department or agency, the objectives of the program, and also a time frame. And so some of these programs get addressed early on in the process. Some of them might be 2 or 3 years out from where we are right now, or right after the document gets adopted. And some of them are ongoing through the length of the planning period. And to give you some sense of how these get measured, at the back of the draft housing element, there is in fact a review of the programs from the 5th cycle. And so those are reviewed. It's kind of indicated, what is the success of the program? Was it met? And what the city will do, the city's required every year to submit an annual progress report for its general plan and for its housing element. And so each year, city staff will review its accomplishments, how it's implemented the housing element and the programs in those housing elements. And so it will, in fact, it gets measured, gets reviewed rather annually. And of course, like I said, there's some timelines that are identified. And in some cases, there are, with the objective design standards, for example, there is a requirement that the city, establish those objective design standards within a period, and that's identified in the implementation program.
And just in concluding with those questions, I thank you very much for answering that. Is the state's involvement in overseeing us meeting those objectives, and is there oversight? And is there does the state give us an A+ for implementing the housing element, or is there any sort of ramifications if we don't meet all of the policies and programs in the 5-year period?
Right. So the state is getting more and more involved in the implementation of the housing elements. And as I said, for example, if the city doesn't need to do this because of the vacant sites that it has available, but if in fact we needed to do a rezoning, then there are some very definitive timelines for when that rezoning would need to occur. So what the city, or rather, when the city completes its annual progress report, submits it to the state, including HCD, HCD is in fact reviewing those, the progress and implementation. Now this, as I mentioned, compared to the 4th and 5th cycles, the expectation is that the state is going to be scrutinizing these implementation measures more and more. And in fact, there's the possibility that if you're not, hitting some of these timelines, that it would in fact affect your ability to, for example, apply for grant funding for a housing-related project. So there are some ramifications. There's more of a there's more teeth, so to speak, right now than there has been in the past as far as the city being required to implement their programs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, please.
So I'm curious, I only see one property in here that is publicly owned, and that's the one on Friar Creek. What's about the inventory of other properties that are owned publicly, and why are they not even included, even if at this point we say that there isn't a current housing opportunity? I'm just wondering why we're not looking at some of this publicly owned land to look at opportunities for the future.
Great. So what I would say is, when we looked at potential sites and went through a process of determining which sites had the greatest potential to develop over the planning period, all those sites, including the publicly owned sites, were taken into consideration. I can't say specifically why one site was not included versus another. But as far as the assessment of sites, this was, and there was a bit of a process to get to where we are. But if there's a site that you think had greater value that we should have looked at more closely, then we can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. And I would just put that information in. Okay, got it.
You can
Will
send
do.
me an email.
All right, thank you, Wendy.
So I had a general question, and that is, you partially answered it in the last question, and that is what is the determining factor for including vacant sites? What establishes them as a likely candidate? Because I know
Okay.
we have zoning which is commercial and mixed use in our development code. The commercial and mixed use zone both allow, now soon will require, housing to be built at a density of 20 units to the acre. However, there are many parcels that are within that zone, and some vacant, or basically vacant, and yet they're not included in the inventory.
Okay. So I want to kind of differentiate a little bit between the vacant and the underutilized sites. For one thing, with regard to the vacant sites, they're obviously a little bit easier to develop because there's nothing impeding development to occur, right? The site is it's a clean slate. But as far as the selection of sites are concerned, what I want you to keep in mind too is that to develop affordable housing, there are economies of scale. And so what the state is looking at for kind of the minimum threshold in order to accommodate affordable housing is for zoning to be in place that will allow for at least 30 dwelling units to the acre. So that's one criteria. The other criteria has to do with the size of the site. The site has to be big enough, greater than half an acre, but not too big, less than 10 acres. So that's another criteria. There also needs to be, we also look at the infrastructure that's available. Is the site serviced by sewer and water already, or would it require some extension of services out to the site? We look at things like ownership. If a site, for example, if an opportunity site requires any assemblage, is there common ownership? So those are some of the things that we look at. With regard to the what we'll call the underutilized sites, the sites that might have a commercial development on them, or maybe it has a residential development that would actually allow, but the zoning would actually allow for higher density. We look at if it's a commercial site, for example, we'll look at well, what is the improvement to land value ratio, right? Does it make sense to actually demolish the structure in order to accommodate housing? I mean, could that realistically happen? We look at if it's a commercial building, is it blighted in any way, or is there vacancy? Are there long-term leases that are on the site? All these things that would help determine, is this site, does it actually have the potential to develop over the 8-year planning period? So those are some of the criteria that we took into account when we were looking at these sites. Also, when it comes to affordable housing in particular, there's you want to consider its access to transportation routes and those sorts of things, and access to amenities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perry, I have a couple of questions. In the fifth cycle, we ended up with 29 extra units on the RENA number. Do we get credit in the sixth cycle for that extra 29?
We don't, unfortunately, get credit for those extra units from the fifth cycle.
And it is also true that any available sites that we had identified in the fifth cycle that were not used, we cannot carry them over to the sixth cycle in terms of if it wasn't built, but was counted on to make up our previous RENA number. Now that it wasn't built on it, we can't count it again. Is that correct?
It's not entirely correct. You can still count them, but there are some things that we need to do. So, for example, one of the programs that we have in place, what we need to end up doing with some of those sites that were identified in previous housing element cycles, but there's no construction that occurred, is that you essentially help streamline the ability of those projects to develop. And so, what we've done in the sites inventory that we'll send to the state along with the housing element is identify if in fact those sites were part of a previous housing element cycle, and then they're going to be subjected to these other standards that will allow development to more easily occur on those sites.
Okay. And then in terms of the draft of finding the potential sites, and my memory serves me, we were up in the 500s as far as the potential sites.
Yeah.
Is there any advantage of showing HCD any extras other than the fact they may not like some of the sites that we pick? But it just seems like if we don't get credit and we can stock them for a future cycle, I would like to give Sacramento's least information as possible.
So what I would, it's as a sort of a rule of thumb, if you will, for this housing element cycle, what we're trying to achieve is if we can get a buffer of anywhere between 15 and 20% of the of sites, that puts us in a good spot. For all for the two primary things that I identified before, one, HCD might not like the site. They might not feel that we've kind of justified that this site has the potential to redevelop. So that's why we want to show that there's more than what we need to accommodate our arena. And the other is to ensure that if a site doesn't in fact develop as lower income affordable housing, that we can somehow make that up over the planning period. So I understand that you want to maybe keep kind of an ace in the hole for future housing element cycles. But I think that what we're trying to do, like I say, is have that percentage buffer that gives us the wiggle room that I think we'll need in order to get state certification and in order to make sure that we can accommodate all these units across all income levels during the planning period.
Very good. Just two more questions. Based upon your knowledge in terms of completing the fifth cycle, what percentage of either communities or counties have actually met the RENA numbers?
I will say that I don't really have that information handy. But what I can say is that it's more the case that the jurisdiction has not met its RENA, especially in these cities where they're a little bit more urban. Cities that are very dense are hard pressed to accommodate their RENA. So I can't say, for sure what the percentage is, but it reflects really well on Sonoma that in fact the city's not only met but exceeded its RENA from the fifth cycle. For this reason, the one thing that we need to do is show the state that there are development trends that are working in Sonoma's favor that kind of demonstrate that in fact the city can accommodate its RENA on these sites. So we want to show that, look, there's multifamily housing has in fact been developed over the fifth cycle and maybe even more recently over the past few years. We wanted anything that we can do to demonstrate that the sites that we've identified do in fact have development potential, because there's examples right here in Sonoma that would show that, and we don't have to look at other jurisdictions to show that there's some regional trend, because in fact there's a local trend. Anything that we can do to demonstrate that benefits us in this certification process with the state.
Thank you, and that leads perfectly into my last semi-question and more of a comment. I'm not particularly thrilled with Sacramento as a whole, and I'm not particularly happy with what I call their overreach into our small community, particularly if we've done reasonably well in the development of our housing. And maybe this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why isn't it Sacramento not just say, Sonoma build X number of units, and we say yes, and we ask them go away, and if we don't build, then they can come down hard on us. But it just seems, once again, an overreach, in my opinion, on Sacramento. If we've met our numbers, we have a good history of it, then why are they generalizing it across the state and just making me not want to send a Christmas card to Sacramento?
Well, I can tell you that I share some of your thoughts, and the one thing that I have noticed as well that what HCD does is they do often take a kind of one-size-fits-all approach to housing elements, and it just doesn't make sense to compare a Sonoma to to a San Francisco or something that's far more urbanized. And oftentimes, the reviewer doesn't have an intimate knowledge of the city, and so there's a little bit of an effort on our part to make sure that they understand, what's going on the ground in Sonoma. And so there's also kind of a movement afoot through the coalition of cities to push back and to make sure that cities are in fact able to retain local control. I think that this sixth cycle housing element, there's going to be some fallout, right? There's cities have pushed back already. We're doing some work in Southern California where, for that housing element cycle, when it came to affirmatively furthering fair housing, the state was in fact developing the requirements as these cities were preparing their housing elements. So it was a moving target, in fact, as far as what the state was going to require. And so cities got together, banded together, pushed against the state, and then there was the state allowed a little bit of flexibility in terms of renewed deadlines for certain items. So I would say that there seems to be movement afoot at the city level to push the state back, but of course, it is the state, and it's coming down from above, and just because Sonoma has done a great job in the previous housing element cycle, it's unfortunately not going to give us a pass. And I've had other cities when, after the first review of HCD and the city didn't necessarily like what HCD found, and the city was maybe inclined to say, well, it is what it is, too bad HCD. The problem is that it's how it could ultimately affect the city's ability to get grant funding, to expose the city to challenge in the development process because you don't have a certified housing element. So Sonoma, again, is in a pretty good spot. There's, believe me, there are other jurisdictions out there that are struggling to find the sites to meet their arena. And in Sonoma, you did a great job in the fifth cycle. We've got a demonstrated development history. There's vacant land in Sonoma. All these factors that play into a little bit more of a seamless process for Sonoma to get its housing element certified. But I do appreciate where you're coming from in terms of the state putting demands on local jurisdictions.
Perry, thank you. And I don't see any other questions at this point. Wendy, we good?
We're good, thank you, and thank you, Perry.
Perry, thank you.
Could I just maybe respond to the one gentleman's question with regard to the devils in the details?
Sure.
I think the one thing that I would like to point out is that the housing element, this is a pretty meaty document. There's a lot of research that went into it, and that's why we have this 30-day review period, so that someone can, you're not going to get, you're getting the kind of condensed version here in this presentation, of course, right? So I would encourage you to go and have a look online, have a look at that document. Wendy's available for questions, Genova's available for questions. So please, by all means, go and have a look at those details, and hopefully you'll see that Sonoma, in fact, is in a good spot with regard to this housing element cycle.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. One quick item of note. We're going to move now into item 7.2, which is a consideration for an application use permit for change of use for a preschool on Broadway. But before we go to that, I would like to let everybody know that after that item, we'll be taking a break, just in case you start to squirm. So we'll be taking a short break after this next item. So let's go ahead and we'll go to 7.1. And at 7.2. I'm so sorry. We had a complete 7.1. Now we're moving on to 7.2. And at this point, I'll turn it over to staff for a report. I'm getting old. It's quite evident. It's self-evident.
Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. The proposed project is for a use permit and, design review as well at 991 Broadway. This is the site of the little school for the last 25 years. I think everybody was...
Volume?
Yep. It's been a wonderful, loved member of our community for a very long time, and the family is looking to breathe new life with a new generation coming forward. The owner will be remaining the same, and they're going to be modifying the building to introduce 2 new businesses at the site for their sons. So the project site is 12,450 square feet. It's currently developed with a 2,673 square foot building, which was the preschool, as well as a parking lot with 9 parking spaces, a playground, and some mature trees. It's located at the corner of Broadway and Malay, right across from the Sonoma Valley High School. The structure is not historic. It was constructed in 1994. And the proposal is to divide the existing building into 2 parts. One part would be an office suite. That would be a chiropractic office, which would be classified as personal services by the zoning code. And the other half would be a coffee house. This would be the second location for the Barking Dog Roasters, which has been a member of our community for a very long time. And the Barking Dog Roasters has several different uses as part of it. So the coffee house itself would be a restaurant, as well as food manufacturing, and it would occupy the northern part of the building. The chiropractic office would be approximately 1,295 square feet and is expected to employ 3 people total, with a maximum of 2 being on site at any given time. The office hours would be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. And the coffee house would occupy approximately 722 square feet for the restaurant and about 656 square feet for the coffee roasting, which is the food manufacturing. The coffee house would be open from 7 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. 7 days a week. It would serve coffee, drinks, beverages, bagged coffee, pastries, things like that. They're mostly to go, so there's a few seats inside and a few seats outside. I believe there's 16 total. The deliveries would come from 2 primary suppliers. About once a week, the deliveries would be made during the hours of operation. And the exterior modifications are pretty minimal. They are just swapping out some windows and doors to make the 2 businesses function, but they will match the existing windows and doors, so you shouldn't notice a huge change. Signage is not being proposed at this time, so that would be approved through a separate application. And this is the site plan. I have a close-up further on, but we've got the existing on the left, I think. Sorry, it's hard to see from here. And the proposed on the right. Essentially, a portion of the existing play area would be converted into the parking lot to meet the parking count. And this is the proposed inside floor plan. You can see the chiropractic office rooms on the left and the seats in the upper portion of the site. We have received some comments from the neighbors raising questions about garbage. I wanted to note that the current garbage is adjacent to the western property line. The applicant is proposing to move it to the northern property line, so it would be adjacent to an existing business. It's the Freshenet headquarters, so it would be moving farther away from the neighbors. And the elevations are what the garbage is proposed to be like. And can you see it on the right side? It's a little tough. Here are the proposed elevations. These are the existing photos and proposed. Again, just a couple extra doors. And these are the specific conditions of approval that are tied to the size of the chiropractic office and hours of operation for that and for the restaurant. And we just got some photos. You have the existing playground on the right, the parking lot. We also have the use permit findings of approval and the findings for design review. And staff's available for questions.
Will they be coming back for a landscape design as well, or is it just for signage?
That is a good question for them. I don't know what they're proposing.
Steve? I noticed the hours of operation for the restaurant end at 1:30. Would that be fixed in the use permit such that they'd have to come back to us if they ever wanted to extend that?
That is an excellent question. We've run into this before. It's probably something we want to consider fixing so they don't have to do that.
Give them a little wiggle room?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Anyone else for staff? At this point,
I'm sorry.
I
I didn't. I'm just curious about loading and unloading and time-limited parking. Most of the people that would be coming here would be doing like quick coffee runs, and so a lot of times people like to park in the street or on the public right of way because it's easier. I'm just curious if there was a space, would the city contemplate or consider like a 15-minute time zone on the street to allow for that?
So they don't require a designated loading space based on the size. I feel that in this case, the parking code is fairly restrictive. Based on the square footage of the chiropractic office, it would require like 8 parking spaces, and based on the number of rooms and the number of employees, that seems very high. So I think the parking is going to be more than adequate. There's also 2 uses at the site where the timing is going to be staggered. The primary time where people go to get coffee is going to be first thing in the morning, probably before the chiropractic office is open. And also some of the patrons going to the chiropractic office will probably also get a cup of coffee. So I think overall the parking is probably more than adequate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions for staff, I will at this point invite the applicant to come forward to the microphone and speak as much as you would like, or defer to the presentation by staff.
I'm Sonia Rasmussen. My husband, Peter Hodgson, is the one who first initially put in the application. He would want to be here, but he is recovering from a stroke, so I've taken over doing this. I just want to say that we've loved living here. We've been here since 1986, and we love giving the community our services by having had the little school and the barking dog. We now want to extend our services down the road and let our children take over for us. And that's one reason why when we had to close the little school, we thought, well, what do we do? Do we sell? Do we rent to another preschool? What do we do? I had a lot of people contacting me about the building, and I thought, no, we want to be able to keep the local people here and give our children a chance to do what we have done over these years. Our main concern, of course, is providing good businesses with and following all of the regulations, the health and safety concerns, and we did that, I feel, successfully with the little school over all the years, and we've done it successfully with the barking dog. And of course, that is our priority, is to provide good services and make sure that we follow all of the regulations that are expected of us. Thank you.
So now, with that presentation, I'd like to then open it up to the public, and anybody that would like to speak to the item that's up, please feel free to come forward. Don't rush. Okay, seeing no movement, then I'll close the public portion. Oh. Okay, I'll check technology.
Yes, thank you. Fred Alabek would like to speak. Go ahead, Fred.
Good evening, Chair Wellinger and Planning Commission. To Sonia, I'd like to remember former Marianne Thompson, who used to work at the little school, who was a friend of mine. And I would also like to suggest, as a condition of approval for the coffee house, that the Planning Commission suggest that the name be changed to the Roasting Dog. And those are my comments.
But Fred, you have 2 minutes left. This is not like
I'll
you.
sell those to someone.
Thank you.
Chair Wellinger, Don Golas would like to speak.
Please.
Go ahead, Don.
Hello, Don.
Hi, can you hear?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Don Dolis, and we live right behind the proposal of 991 Broadway. We live 970 First Street West and First Street. And I have questions about a lot of things. One of them is foremost is the coffee roaster. The coffee roaster is going to be roasting coffee, and it's going to be emitting fumes. And I'm concerned about those fumes. And I wrote questions to the people to find out what they were using, what EPA guidelines they were going by, and what types of filters, what type of ways of preventing that from coming in the house. For one thing, when I smell roasted coffee, I get an instant headache and I get nauseous. That's me, but I know. We have our windows open all the time for fresh air. That's what Sonoma is all about. And this place is gonna be only 100, not even 150 feet away from our house. So the wind can blow it in at any time. So I'd like to know what they're going to approve through the EPA for a ventilation system. That's my first thing, the coffee roaster. Oh, and also how it's gonna help everybody that works there too.
Okay,
That's my first question.
okay, go ahead and make your questions known, and then we'll create an opportunity that the applicant and/or staff will be able to comment, or will require further input. So proceed with your other questions, please.
Okay, and wait, in addition to the first question, hold it. From what I was reading on the websites with the EPA and so forth, and coffee roasting, there's two chemicals that are given off. One is called a diacetylene, and it's linked to lung cancer, and the other one's called acrylamine. I'm not pronouncing it right. And they both can have long-term effects and can cause nerve damage. So I'd like to have that addressed. Okay, my other question is parking. All right, we already deal with a lot of noise from the high school. Early in the morning, kids are parking in front of our house all the time, zipping up and down the street, lots of noise. And then after school, the same thing. And lunchtime, yeah, 3 times a day, right? And then now we're gonna have just adjacent to us, right next to us, is gonna be a parking lot with 13 spaces. And they're gonna have cars going in and out every 15 minutes. If it's a chiropractor place, they're not gonna be in there long either. They're gonna go in and out. People are gonna grab their coffee. We're gonna have trucks, especially some of these pickup trucks that are the size of my yard, going in and out of the parking lot. And that, to me, is just gonna create a lot of noise, a lot of congestion, and a lot of pollution that we don't have right now. Everybody that lives on First Street West is owner occupied except for one house. And so we sit in our backyards a lot, and we enjoy the peace and quiet of the backyard. And we're butted right up against this commercial zone. So we don't have any leeway, none at all. I mean, on the other side of the fence is another commercial business. So we don't have like neighbors with grass and yards and houses, stuff like that. It's all commercial. So it's noise. Okay? And the next one is with the waste receptacles. We have a problem in our neighborhood with rats. And our neighbor had 14 rats infested in her house. The roof rats I found out about. And they come up, yeah, when they're doing construction and stuff, they come up and they're all over the place. We've had to take down a tree, everything to prevent them from coming onto our roofs and getting into our houses. And we're trying to prevent them from even being around. So having an establishment with food is gonna encourage more rodents. And I'm looking at your designs here very carefully, and you have a really nice looking garbage disposal area, but it's not rodent proof. There's a top to it. Any rodent can come in, climb onto those reciprocals, chew away, and they got all the food they want. So there's nothing to prevent them from going after the food. It's not like going to Yosemite where they have the bear-proof reciprocals. Once you close them, nobody can get in or out of them. So that's a big concern. We don't want to have any more rats. We don't want to have any at all. What else? And then, wait. Oh, and then as far as the parking goes, it says on the boundaries with the easement, it's supposed to be 15 feet. Well, if you look at the fence or the wall that's up there, it's only about 5 feet from the residence. So the trucks are and cars are gonna go right up to that area. They're not gonna be more than 5 to 8 feet away. And that's where all the noise and pollution is coming from. If they're not gonna be 100 feet away, 80 feet away, or 130 feet away, they're gonna be right there all the time. And that's a big concern.
Okay, anything else?
So I can't see anybody here, I'm just talking, so I hope you heard everything. Thank
Okay,
you.
Very good. Thank you, Don.
No other comments on Zoom?
Okay, I'll once again invite the audience if they wish to come forward. No?
I'll come up first, and then I'll let my son, who is the manager of the Barking Dog, talk. First, I want to say that the little school had just as much traffic, if not more, every day, because we had 45 children that were dropped off between 7 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock in the morning, and then there was a pickup at lunch and a drop-off after lunch, and then a pickup in the afternoon of all the children. Plus, we were out on the playground at least from 9:30 till 4:30, the different groups every day, sometimes even until 6 o'clock. So we had a lot of noise. We had a lot of food because we had to eat breakfast and lunch and dinner and snacks and everything. So I don't see the barking dog bringing more to those issues. Now you get to talk about the roaster and so on.
Okay.
I'm sorry, identify.
Oh yeah, sorry. Victor Hodgson.
Thank you.
I run the Barking Dog, and so the first question was about the roaster. I'm working with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, who is our governing board for air quality, and I'm working to get the best solution for the roasting that I can. I'm looking at a catalytic converter right now, or not catalytic converter, sorry, catalytic afterburner, which is supposed to be 99% effective on removing all of those toxins and smoke and smell that goes into the air. That's my number one solution. They also have recommended that I raise the stack height of the smokestack that comes out of my ceiling, and that would allow for better distribution, so it wouldn't condense as much in that exact area. And yeah, that's what I have for the ventilation stuff. As for the toxins, that has been found to not be enough to be actually harmful to us as people. It's only in very specific quantities, and what you get from roasting isn't enough for that. Technically, it's worse to stand next to a coffee grinder while the coffee grinds than it is to stand next to the roaster as we're roasting coffee. For the parking, like my mother said, I mean, I don't think it should be too big of an issue. And unfortunately, I don't know how we can move the parking off the wall just because of the layout of the land, unless we were to pick up the building and move that instead right next to everybody's homes, which I don't think is a better solution. Yeah, and then as far as the rats go in the area, I don't know anything about that situation. I've never heard any complaints about it, but we can do what we can to address that. get better dumpsters from Recology and all of those guys. And then, yeah, I think that's all the questions. I know the 15 feet, I believe, is for the building, right? Not the parking lot. But yeah, if he has any questions, he can reach out to me directly at the Barking Dogs email. It's info@barkingdogroasters, and I'd be happy to answer any of the questions.
Thank you. I think.
Since you brought up landscaping, maybe you could have the applicant.
I can comment on that. There is a condition of approval for them to have a landscape plan that's approved by a landscape architect.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then I'm closing the public portion again and bringing it back to the commissioners for comments and questions and possible motion. Bill.
I have a question actually of staff. I just realized that being a neighbor, what is my exclusion radius? 500 feet or 300 feet?
1,000.
Or 1,000?
They change it from 500. Wasn't it changed from 500 to 1,000 feet?
Wendy says 500, so I trust her.
Okay, so I'm good that way. So, thank you.
Okay, Steve.
Well, I like the project quite a bit, and it's minimally, it preserves a building that those of us that have been here a long time like to see in its location, and I think it's great that the family is continuing to use it. I think the concerns expressed by the neighbor behind you were adequately addressed, and it seems as if the air quality control people are going to be looking out for the issues that he was concerned about, and that the traffic won't be any more than what was there before. In terms of rats, I can only sympathize, having regularly set traps in my yard on Patton Street because they come from my tomatoes, and I'm at war with them right now. But that's not a problem that's unique to businesses, residences, particularly if you grow food. It's all over Sonoma. So I do think that we should extend in the conditions of approval the hours of operation should this become so wildly successful that you decide you want to continue it into the afternoon. I'm sure that the kids from across will want to hang out and drink more coffee. So anyway, I would suggest adding at least a couple hours to the 1:30 time, and I would be, with those changes, moving for approval of this application.
Thank you, Steve.
Would the commission like to have any conversation about the number of parking spaces and considerations for reducing it, or we're comfortable with the 11 for the two uses?
I'm comfortable, but
I'm comfortable too, as long as there's not like designated parking, like chiropractic office only. As long as it's shared, that's fine with me.
Sheila.
I'm excited about this project, and I think that the little school has a great reputation, and if you kept your neighbors and all those parents happy for the 35 years you ran that school, you clearly know what you're doing, and you put a lot of thought into it, and you've given a lot to the community, and you've taught your family. And I think Barking Dog, though I've never been there, I apologize, I would like to go to the new one. I like that your emphasis is community, and that is front and center on your website. And I think that the neighborhood will benefit from the community gathering spot. And I think that I agree with Commissioner Barbos that I think that we should look at extending the hours. I could see wanting to walk down there in the afternoon or even the evening, maybe not too late, but having a little place to go hang out with your neighbors. I see parking being sufficient, and I really hope that a lot of the neighbors will walk there because it gives them a destination to walk to. I know lots of people that walk to Pete's, so I don't know why people wouldn't walk there, and it might give them a sense of kind of urban excitement and bring something down to that area that's not there. I live on a farm out in Shellville. I have a lot of rats. I have an exterminator. I have a condo in town. We have an exterminator. We have rats. You know, they're here. We fight them, but they're here. And if you've been able to handle the little crumb gobblers dropping their food all over the place, you know how to handle cleanup. So that I'm not worried about. And I would like to wish your husband full healing. So I'm in support of this project.
I'm also in support of the project. I do encourage, if we can, even through the conditions of approval, to have a roaster venting system that will remove as much of the odor as possible. Living in this neighborhood, every night at 10 o'clock, I smell MacArthur Place put out their wood-burning pizza. And it's an annoyance because I have things open. And so I appreciate the neighbors' concern about that. But it sounds like you're going to take care of that. And in terms of rodents in the neighborhood, my neighborhood, raccoons and rats are evil at night. And so I would encourage that we require, through a condition of approval, that the trash enclosure be at least screened to help prevent the rodents from entering it, as just an accommodation to alleviate some of the nuisance of attractant. And those are the two things that I agree with you. I think that the neighborhood would benefit, I think, in the future, and you would benefit if this establishment was open till 6 o'clock in the evening. So.
Yes, I agree with my fellow commissioners, and I also am excited to see uses like this that encourage more pedestrian activity and also livens that part of Broadway as we see more housing development occur and redevelopment. Those sorts of uses are really important, such as coffee shops. And I agree with increasing the hours of operation to allow for people to work and co-work at the coffee shop, because you may find a lot of clients that would want to be there past 1:30. And I believe that there's adequate parking. As long as there's not designated parking, I think it should work fine. So I concur with all my other commissioners and support this project.
I'll keep my comments fairly simple. The extended hours I do support. I think we need to have discussion of what that might be. But if we're talking about coffee in the evening, and I enjoy my coffee till at least 8. So anyway, we can talk about that. I think it is important that we do meet the air quality standards, whatever they're set. And the good Lord knows we're in a part of America where the air quality people seem to be very proactive. So I'm not overly concerned about that. I am concerned about contributing to the delinquency and truancy of the high schoolers. So you do realize that you will be creating more of a problem that we already have. And with that, I think I too will cast my support, and at this point have a discussion about hours.
My first thought is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Yeah, I support that too.
Okay.
I like your idea of 8 p.m. Walk down after dinner and have a after dinner coffee. But I would be open to whatever you guys decide on that.
I do have a question. I do know that getting building permits and permits from the public health department for any sort of establishment like this would require some sort of review. Would that review also include ventilation?
Yeah, so we do have a blanket condition of approval that for all other agency permits, so it's condition of approval 15, and I recommend adding a specific line for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We don't typically have that as our standard list, but the condition reads: the following agencies must be contacted by the applicant to determine permit and other regulatory requirements of the agency prior to issuance of a building permit, including the payment of applicable fees. That includes the Sonoma County Water Agency, Sonoma County Department of Public Health, Sonoma County Department of Environmental Health, Sonoma Valley School District, Caltrans, and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. So in this case, they are on Broadway. None of the improvements would encroach on Broadway, but just good food for thought if they ever do anything on that front. You need an encroachment permit.
I think that should be fine. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve this project with the hours of approval running from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And were there anything else that we want to add to that?
Trash.
Oh, the enclose the trash, put screening on the trash enclosure.
And adding the agency and the commission.
And adding the air quality folks in the condition to approve.
And I also have parking shall not be designated for specific uses or businesses.
Thank you.
Second.
Further discussion? Nobody wants coffee till 8? Okay, roll call.
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
and Chair Wellender.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations. So as promised, we're taking a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and begin on item number 7.3. facility on First Street West. And with that, I would love for
You to use your microphone.
I will love for staff to begin speaking in a microphone that's on and give the report, please.
Thank you, Chair Wellender. This is for a wine tasting use permit located at 381st Street West, otherwise known as Walt Wines. The project is located just down the street at the corner of West Spain Street and First Street West. The property is zoned commercial. It's located in the downtown district. It's in the historic overlay zone and also the Plaza Retail Overlay District. In 2020, the City Council adopted a resolution that authorized the city and the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitor Bureau to take steps to help businesses survive during the COVID pandemic. The Sonoma Alfresco allows businesses such as Walt Wines to provide outdoor seating on private property. Currently, the Sonoma Alfresco program is scheduled to end in October 21st with an extension to April of next year. Walt Wine currently operates as a legal non-conforming wine tasting facility. It has 28 indoor seats and 44 outdoor seats, 8 in the front porch area and 36 in the backyard area. The applicant is requesting a wine tasting use permit to allow an increase of 8 outdoor seats to total 52 outdoor seats. The indoor seating is not proposed to change. With regard to the development code requirements, a non-conforming use of land can continue unless it is proposed to be increased. And in this case, since the applicant is proposing an increase of outdoor seating, it requires the Planning Commission to issue a wine tasting use permit. The parking requirement for a wine tasting room is 1 space for each 300 square feet of gross sales area. And for outdoor seating, no off-street parking is required. The existing gross sales area is 620 square feet. Therefore, 2 parking spaces are required and 5 spaces are provided. While the on-site parking was not discussed as a project issue in the staff report, the Planning Commission has the authority to require additional on-site parking or other measures to reduce parking demand as conditions of approval. And the Planning Commission may also want to discuss parking impacts related to the wine tasting use permit. There are certain findings that this commission must make in order to approve a wine tasting permit. One of them is that for a wine tasting room in the Plaza Retail Overlay District, you can't exceed, the wine tasting rooms need to be less than 25, and that is the case. There are 22 wine tasting rooms in the Plaza Retail Overlay District at this time. And staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the project and provide direction to staff. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Yes, Bill.
Wendy, so I understand it that there's no current use permit. This project has not, it was established during the time when there was no use permit required.
Correct.
So there's no permitted outdoor seating via a use permit.
Right.
And the outdoor seating was just established during the period,
Yes.
or as part of al fresco?
It was established before al fresco.
My question is, I just want to confirm that the outdoor seating does not include covered seating or any sort of canopy or awning or anything.
Not in the front yard area.
But in the back.
In the back, there is I believe there is an existing type of shade structure.
Okay, would that be considered a structure requiring a building permit, and would that be counted as floor area? Covered area?
No.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I need some technical help here. Non-conforming uses cannot be expanded, so we don't have the ability to expand it. However, the workaround is to make it a conforming use by granting the use permit.
Right, so you can't expand a non-conforming use, but you can grant a wine tasting use permit, and then the wine tasting room would be conforming.
I just go back to that Jack's Filling Station, all the trouble we had on that one, and I just get stuck on that, so
Thank you.
I need help, thank you.
Steve?
So just to pick up on that last point, since there's no approved or approval previously for any of the outdoor seating, is all of that part of what's up for consideration tonight?
Yes.
And so as part of this consideration, will we deal with any of the outdoor seating? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And it seems like from looking at the past correspondence that the front yard outdoor seating was added around 2017 when they did some work on the front yard. Is that what staff recalls?
There were some modifications done to the front yard in 2017. At that time, they realized that they would need to make an application through the Planning Commission to use the outdoor seating. So that didn't move forward. But then under the Alfresca program, it was allowed to have wineries and be able to put outdoor seating in the front yard area.
Right, but then in the interim between the 2017 and the need to get approval for whatever outdoor seating and the implementation of Alfresco, which was 2020, were there not seats and the tables in the front yard in violation of the city's requirements?
There were, and we asked them to remove them, and they did.
Question, I know some things take a while, but this project has been kind of percolating for 5 years, is what has been suggested? And why it hasn't been brought to more of a focused conclusion is, are we going fires and COVID as the contributing factors, or why has it been so slow to evolve?
Well, part of it was the wine tasting use permit regulations were being
Okay.
developed,
Okay,
and then there were fires and COVID.
okay, thank you.
One more question. Steve?
Well, I have one last question. The wine tasting rooms across the street in that same general area, would you agree that those are all permitted outdoor seating areas by the city as part of a use permit?
There's only 3 wineries or wine tasting rooms in the city that have a wine tasting use permit.
So the ones across the street are legal non-conforming
Right.
as well? Okay, thanks.
Steve?
Is the city in the process of developing some new regulations and standards with respect to wine tasting rooms and or parking in consideration with them?
So I'm not aware that the city council has directed staff to revise the wine tasting use permit regulations.
What about parking as it might apply to this?
We'll be discussing that in item 7.5 tonight.
The parking.
Okay, so how does that work if we're trying to decide a use permit before we know what the new parking regulations might be?
Well, we don't know what they are, so you would base them off the current requirements, which is two spaces for the amount of gross floor area they have.
Okay, would we have the option of saying that they would have to apply or comply with the yet-to-be adopted parking standards? No?
Well, I can tell you, the parking standards as proposed in the later staff report would require 5 parking spaces for the indoor seating and 15 parking spaces for the outdoor seating.
20 total? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we have to use the regulations that are on the books at the time that we're considering the application, but we can pull up the parking standard. I believe it allows flexibility for the planning commission, right?
Wasn't there a comment early on that because of the way this is coming to us, we can set the parking standards for this project?
Yes, it's a wine tasting use permit, so this commission has
Okay.
the authority to do that.
Thank you.
Any more questions for staff?
Yeah, if you want, I can pull up that standard. It's in the special use standards for wine tasting rooms. Although I don't think I can share from the screen. I was, and then I realized it was here. Right?
I think we should go out to the public, and then if Christina wants to provide some additional information later.
Okay, I think at this point I'm going to be more specific. I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward if he so wishes to state his name and speak into the mic, and we'll be here to listen.
It's good to see everyone again. My name is Jeff Spelly. I'm the general manager for Walt Wines. If it's okay, before I provide my prepared statement, I'd like to clear up a couple things, if that's okay. First, there's no structure in the backyard. We have a series of umbrellas that keeps our staff and our guests as cool as possible. Nothing is permanent, and outside of a big giant redwood tree, we have no other shade structures there in the backyard. The second thing I wanted to point out was in 2017 March, we communicated with the city staff about how we would propose a front yard patio. At the time, there was not a lot of, we were still under the 2014 ordinance. And so we asked Wendy what we needed to do. I think the thing got lost just in the process of the noise that was going on at the time about permits. So I don't blame staff for that. We came back in August and we started construction of the patio because we were preparing to what we thought was just move the 8 seats that were existing on our porch down to the patio. So we started that project. We were notified by staff that we had to stop and we had to apply for a use permit. So on October 3rd, before the moratorium, we applied for a use permit. We can present that document if you'd like. Then we had the fires, as you know, on the 8th, and so we were offered administrative temporary use by David Goodison at the time. That ended when we were notified by staff that we had to pack it up, so we packed it up. And so we applied that application, even though that application preceded the moratorium that was authored by the City Council. We complied and just waited for the new ordinance to be authored. And then we've come in now today to apply under the new ordinance, probably about a year late, but largely because of COVID. So that's fair. I'll start my prepared statement, if that's right. So thank you for your time. As a business operator of a tasting room since 2009, we've seen many transitions in the community in the course of 13 years. We're here today to both formalize our land use of the property and provide a small expansion that is currently permitted under the alfresco program. The former Wrestler and current Walt Tasting Room has been in operation under our leadership since 2009. Prior to our leadership, the property existed as a tasting room since 2004. For 18 years, as a tasting room, it operated indoors and in both the front and rear patio. So there's existing use in both areas. And since 2013, the upper porch patio, so this is the patio that we talk about in the project, had 2 tables that seated 4 people. So that's the elevated porch. And there were 36 seats in the backyard. We operated the same seats that we do inside pretty much the whole time. In the proposed wine tasting use permit, we're seeking to continue to operate the front area permitted by the alfresco program and add 8 seats. So that is the impact that we're trying to add to the front yard. For the public who's not visited Walt, this is largely the area that we're trying to permit. It's about 300 square feet. So it's not a very big area. It's a very small area. It is bordered by a planter box and boxwoods. That's required by the ABC in order to create what's called a barrier between you and the public space so that we can monitor them. So that's the reason for the landscaping that we started. We were getting that project ahead of schedule so we could apply, so we could get the permit from the ABC, and then we went to staff for the permit. So that's how that unfolded. For the public, sorry, it's about 15 by 20, about 300 square feet. On average, dating back to 2016, but omitting 2020 because it was not a year when we saw a lot of guests, our tasting room hosts 4.42 guests per day, or per hour, 31 guests per day. So that's our average guest visitation. While we offer tastings and sample our products with service similar to a restaurant, we are more like a retail, we are more aligned to a retail establishment because our end goal is to sell wine to our guests, whether they have a tasting experience or not. Our goal is to actually operate like a retail store. But we do offer experiences so that they can sample our wines. 33% of our guests are from the local Bay Area, including members of the public who live right here in the city of Sonoma. We have local people who work for us that live in the city of Sonoma, and we have others that work outside in the local area. 65% of our production is based right here in Sonoma County. 75% comes from Sonoma, Napa, and Mendocino counties. We do offer a variety of different wines. We provide 5 parking spaces, as Wendy offered, for our guests, which is more than we need in the 2014 tasting room ordinance, and that included all the parking for our outdoor people. We want to thank the city for their actions to provide our businesses an opportunity to succeed through Sonoma Al Fresco program. It not only provided businesses outdoor seating areas throughout the pandemic, but we think it also changed what our customers desire. So today, we know that some of our businesses are proposing myriad ways to continue to offer those experiences in the Al Fresco program, and we would just point out that none of what we're applying for invades the public domain. This is a project that's wholly consistent on the property, and it's not intended to take any parking spaces away or encroach on the right-of-way. So we applied to make our 300 square foot patio permanent, and we sought public feedback in ways we described in the project plan, so I hope you had a chance to read those. And we welcome your feedback today and look forward to formalizing our wine tasting use permit. Thank you.
Yeah, we may have a few questions for the applicant. Go ahead,
Sure.
Steve.
With respect to the seats on the front porch,
Yes.
I've been fortunate enough to have been a guest wine tasting at a couple of times with some friends who are members, and I don't recall ever seeing anything on the front porch other than that bench that's on the left side as you go up the steps, and 2 chairs on the right side with a little table between them. And this has been over like the past several years. So is that where are the 8 seats you keep talking about?
So if you actually go back on Google Maps in 2007, you'll see guests sitting on the patio in 4 seats. And we actually maintained that 4 seats for a very long time until the al fresco period. And that at that point, we put those seats down on the main area. So we do currently now have a bench and 2 seats. That's how we've operated, just because we were trying to meet all of our guests outdoors as opposed to meeting them inside during the pandemic. But as far as I've worked there, and I've worked for the company since 2006, so I was there through the rest of their transition, we've always had tables outside as far as I'm aware.
Okay, but on the porch, pre-current setup, you had 4 seats up there, it sounds like, 2 on each side.
We had two tables that could accommodate 4 guests, 1 on each side.
Of the front porch?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's tiny.
It's quaint.
Cozy.
We only have to put 1 glass or 2 glasses
if you
down.
have more than 1 glass. But
Yeah. Well, we only use 1 glass, so it fits. But I'll just agree with you that it's cozy.
Okay, that's it for my questions.
No problem.
Any more questions?
I just have one question. Since we're, considering formalizing everything, this could be a question for you and staff. How does this project and the seating meet ADA?
So the project, as far as I'm aware, when it was built and converted to commercial, complies with ADA in the same way that it has. We've made no interior changes to the property, and we actually proposed, or we sought, I guess, guidance through the business, through the building code, for how we could actually clear the room to allow for just better flow of traffic and better flow of guests, because it's a house that has very small rooms. And so through that process, we actually discovered the architect that's on First Street East. I forget his name at this point, but he did the work to make it commercial property, and also produced all of the ADA documentation that's at City Hall now. So as far as I'm aware, when we took over in 2009, we've made no interior modifications. So the property would still be licensed ADA through the city's own building department.
So any sort of extended outdoor area would comply with ADA, in your opinion?
So the ADA path of travel is really, I think, the thing that we're trying to get to. So the path of travel starts from First Street West up a small grade to the existing back patio, and then you're passing the new alfresco patio as you do that. From there, there's a second ramp that brings you into the tasting room, and from there, path of travel was determined through at least through my conversation with the building department, that it was to go through the double doors and directly into the back where we have a bathroom that's been licensed ADA.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank
you so much.
At this point.
Do you need the, I brought the drawings, so I wasn't sure if you needed. Okay, sure.
Okay, now at this point, I'd like to open up the public and give you an opportunity to come forward and speak. I am pretty casual about the 3-minute rule. My only request is that it remains civil, on point, not repetitious, and state name and welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jim Bohar. I live at 299 First Street West, right down the street, about 4 or 5 doors up on the other side of the street from the Walt facility. My feeling here is there's a fair number of controversial issues, and you've already indicated maybe more time. I'd like to have as much time as I need within reasonable limits. If possible, I'd like, if there are any questions of me, I'd like there to be some opportunity for the staff or the commissioners to discuss some of those things. I object to the seating and improvements in the front yard, as well as inadequate parking. My role is to safeguard our neighborhood history property. My interest is in the neighborhood, development code, the general plan compliance, seating, and parking. Also, its location within the Soma Historic Overlay and our residential adjacency, which is in the Historic Train District. The following issues relate to the environmental concerns, noise, safety, traffic, and parking. Adding 16 seats to the existing rear and inside seating area for a total of 72 seats in and out total, with only 5 parking spaces, will make the existing saturated parking situation far worse on our street. This last Sunday around noon, I took some pictures of the street from Spain up to the Depot Hotel, 11:45 in the morning. There were no parking spaces available. Every space on either side of the street was taken. And it's not unusual for 4 or 5 days a week for that to be the case. That adds to, so 72 seats, it seems like is going to really cause some serious problems of congestion. And I think you have 5 letters from my neighbors you received today and yesterday indicating that they feel the same way about it. There's no room for our guests or service providers or our relatives who visit us to park. The house I live in is on a private driveway. There are 5 houses, and we have to park in our garages. There's no street parking, so there's really no space for our guests. Tasters often, this is down at the end of the street where you have Auteur on one side and Walt on the other. Tasters often crisscross the street between cars trying to make access to the 3 tasting rooms, and there's a amount of congestion and potential risk down there. Increased traffic congestion in our neighborhood, as well as frequently turning around in our driveways. It diminishes our right to quiet enjoyment of our homes by emission creep of commercial activity. Potential impact on our home sales. Something about the project history. In 2017, Bill Essert from Design Review Commission called me and said he noticed construction going on down in front of the Walt place, and the lawn was being torn out and so forth. I think he talked to you, Wendy, about that, and you sent Bill back an email, which I have, by the way, indicating that the Walt people have been notified that they couldn't, they might be able to build something down there, but they couldn't put any tables out and use them for customers until they had a permit. And we're looking for that permit today, 5 years later. It's also true that the applicant has been on the agenda and been continued 5 times over that time. The neighbors have gotten together, ready to have a meeting, and it's been continued. This is the 6th time that I've been here and not had a meeting. And that strikes me as an unusual schedule as to how that happened. Additionally, there were 24 seats actually installed in the fall of 2017. The number of seats has varied down there since, for 5 years, between 24 to 8 to 16. Now there have been 8 seats down there for some weeks. And this morning I looked out there were 8 seats there, and they don't have a permit. Commissioner Barbos pointed out that the porch is probably not used. I interpreted what you said as the porch being relatively unusable. I walk by there 10 times a week, and I've never seen anybody out there drinking wine because the people going in and out of the 2 doors would be bumping their knees. The application says that 8 seats are on the porch. No, they're all of the seats, the 16 seats that 8 on the porch and 8 proposed, they're all in one area on the lawn. The lawn was taken away. I have pictures of the lawn being taken away. I have pictures of the 16 seats there, several pictures, and I have pictures over the last 5 years that you'll see the seats varying between 6, 8, 20. And so I don't, with all respect to the applicant, I don't like to disagree with the public statement, but I'm compelled to do that. I made some objections to Mr. Goodison, and I didn't get a response back. I hired an attorney, Mary Piasta downtown, to write a letter to the city council. I had to write a 4-page letter, and then the first thing started out, this law firm represents 10 people who are dissatisfied with having seating in the front. It went on 3 or 4 pages indicating that this agreement, whatever it was, I think I heard something like administrative use, which I've never heard of administrative use, allowing people to do something like this. Had a hand carried to all the city council members, and I didn't get a response. I assumed that the city manager had heard about that from the mayor or the council members, but I didn't get a response. So I had another lawyer help me to write a letter to the city manager, Carol Joanna, and I didn't get a response from that. So I sent another letter to David Goodison and the city attorney, and that's when the dialogue started about the fact that this was an important issue that had to be talked about within the staff. The attorneys had to discuss this, find out whether there's anything valid about it or not. That continued on until 2020. And I have a portfolio of those letters, photos of the sites that I've spoken about. Ultimately, I decided that it was being kept within the city cadre. I wasn't getting a response, so I called Bob Smith, the city prosecutor, and we went at Pete's in the back. We talked for an hour. I showed him my portfolio of material. He said, "Fine, I'll go talk to the city manager." And came back to me a few days later and said, "I know you're frustrated, Jim, but I think you better try again with Carol. You better. I haven't had any luck with this thing."
Excuse me, Jim. Let's go ahead with 3 minutes.
May I conclude?
Oh, no. You have 3 more minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. No.
Well, I'll just continue, I'll be finished shortly.
Sure.
Thus, it should be suggested as in the application that the applicant is merely, it suggests in the application that the applicant is merely giving a formality to this temporary measure, the alfresco. The alfresco program was temporary. It gave no guarantee, and as far as I know, gave no rights of any kind into a future affirmation within the regulations. And these seats were installed and used clearly and openly for 5 years, long before the alfresco program ever went in place. To suggest that there's some relationship between 5 years of seating and the alfresco program, which guaranteed nothing, is a card trick. And I disagree very strongly that the alfresco program has anything to do with it. The current wine tasting regulations are not complete or entirely fitting to today's circumstances. For example, the wine tasting use permit regulations are silent on number of outside tables and seats. It is silent on parking. The Walton organization has 72 seats. No regulation for parking, no regulations for seating. I don't want to speak for our neighbors because I've been accused of being the leader of the neighborhood opposition. I am Jim Bohar, private citizen, looking out for my own interests. However, the neighbors did send 5 letters indicating that they objected to the parking situation and objecting to the seats in the front lawn. So I'm astounded that 72 seats could exist with no parking or regulation. I think the new regulations need to be carefully thought out and promulgated. The current wine tasting regulations are not complete or entirely fitting today's circumstances. For example, no guidelines for seating and parking. My request is that you deny this application. Have the development code regulations updated. The applicant can then apply under the new City Council Planning Commission approved regulations. I believe that process is recognized to avoid a poor precedent through an applicant exception rather than fix the program. And I think, if I recall, that was the subject of a number of discussions with you, the commissioners, to fix that kind of a problem rather than making exceptions to the rules, setting a bad example for the other wine tasting rooms, which are going to come back and quote that precedent. Thank you. Please deny this application.
Thank you, Jim. All right. Anyone else would like to come forward and speak? Please come to the mic, identify yourself.
I'm Nancy Dance, and I am local Sonoma. I'm about a mile off the plaza, and I want to say how valuable I feel that outdoor space is for our community. It gives you an opportunity to have the feel of Sonoma, the Sonoma Square, the historic district, and yet not be in the hustle bustle that the square can be sometimes. I've been there many times with my husband, with my family, out of town company, and you're removed enough that you can still feel the square, the everything that goes on out there without having to be in the chaos. It's a charming area, it's relaxing, and when I can't handle the stress at home, well, we can just go a mile down the road, have a nice little mini vacation for an hour or two, and it's a valuable thing for the community. I mean, it's charming, it's quaint, it's relaxing, and I think we all need a little of that now and again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Jones. I have lived in Sonoma since 1990 and seen many changes. I actually worked at a restaurant that is now where Della Santina's is back in the early 90s. I know about parking when you work on the square. I just wanted to make a couple of points about issues that were brought up. 74, 72 seats, okay, let me back up. I work for Walt Wines. I have been there for 7+ years and have seen a lot of changes. Prior to that, I worked at another tasting room right by the men's clothing store, Araldi's. I worked for them for 3 or 4 years too. So I've had experience working on a square. I'll talk about the parking. We offer 5 parking spots. The 2 other wineries that are being referred to right across the street from us don't offer any. There is no parking available for them except what's on the streets. And I'm sure it hits a couple others on the square. Having worked as long as I have at Walt, by 10 o'clock, most of the spots are full because they're filled with people who work on the plaza. There are also hotel guests at the El Dorado Hotel and the Sonoma Hotel. I see them, I watch them, I know, it's like, oh yeah, there goes, Alfredo back over to a restaurant that he works at. So I know that it's not impacted by a lot of people at the tasting rooms. So many of them will call and say, where do we park? And we send them off to behind, where they're the parking.
Casa Grande.
Yeah, there's so many other places. So I know the issues and the angst, because we have to have a place to park. So where do we park when we come to work? We don't count as the wine tasters. I just want to bring that up. But you've got 72 seats. They're not all full at the same time. We can't, as a staff, accommodate that many people. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, we've got an average of like 31, 34 people a day. Then you stop and think how many walked, how many have been walking the square, how many actually came in a car. You're not going to have 31 cars. Even in half, you're not going to have 15 cars of people coming to our tasting room. The improved landscaping, to me, improved the look of the house. I have friends that used to live there prior to 2009 when it became a tasting room. And it was just an average lawn with a giant palm tree in front. We put in these beautiful little, what are they, steel flower beds. We tried to put flowers and at least give some character to, we want to make it look pretty. The other thing I was going to mention about the 8 seats. I worked there when we had the 8 seats on the front porch, and they were little 4-tops, at bistro tables. They were tight, but they were there when I started back in 2015. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. We know who you are, but you know the routine.
All right, very good. I empathize. The logical extension of these various points might be this. If their business was eliminated, the parking problem would be just as saturated as it already is. If you allowed them twice or even thrice the number of tables, the parking situation would be basically as it is. The essence of our economic well-being is growth. And this, anyway, I empathize, It would be the same. Come on.
Thank you. All right.
Chair Wellender, we have a comment from a member of the public on Zoom.
If you must.
Andriana Duckworth may speak.
Welcome.
Thank you, commissioners, council members, and people of the public. Can you hear me all right? I apologize. I am on a phone right now.
No problem.
Wonderful. My name is Andriana Duckworth, 17055 Brookside Road. I am the executive director of the Sonoma Valley Vintners and Growers Alliance, for which Walt Wines has been a member of since they became a tasting room organization here in Sonoma. On behalf of our board of directors, we are asking to support Walt Wines' request of the proposed use of their patio space in front of their small tasting house. For over a decade now, Walt Wines has created world-class Sonoma Valley wines as well as other appellations. They have strong roots in our local agricultural communities, as well as a high level of commitment to stewardship. Their contributions among their peers, the Sonoma Valley community, even outside just the plaza, and the region as a whole is critical to the fabric and the success of our Sonoma Valley, and more specifically, the Sonoma Plaza. paving the way to allow Walt Wines this small request of expanded use of the patio will only aid in their success of their local business, which also drives our local economy here in Sonoma Valley. Like many businesses and industries, our wine industry, our agricultural community has faced a number of challenges, and diminished tourism still continues to be an impact from the pandemic. Our valley, we remain in a state of recovery that will continue over the next few years, as we have all learned, as many other industries. So with the flexibility and the efforts of our local business community, we have survived until this point. However, regulation of our industry that is neither warranted nor necessary, it's certain to upset the delicate balancing act that we have been able to achieve under these historically adverse circumstances. Our wineries, like Walt, rely on directly marketing to consumers in order to sell their wines. And especially given the fragile state of the restaurant industry specifically, that's expected to persist for years to come. So, with those impacts mentioned, threats are still posed to this industry and this community, the small community that we have here in the Sonoma Valley, and our survival. So we ask that you please support the request of Walt Wines, as they've demonstrated nothing short of responsibility and respect in these endeavors. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for your commitment to the community, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Andriana.
Chair Wellender, I would just like to clarify that the applicant is requesting outdoor seats in the number of 52, consisting of 8 seats in the front area and 8 seats on the front porch and 36 in the backyard area. Thank you.
Okay, I see a hand raised, but I think we will, real short.
My apologies. One thing that is never mentioned in any of these situations, I know that there are people that feel we have too many wine tasting rooms, that we have, alcohol problems. I just wanted to bring up the fact that every staff member who serves wine or alcohol has to have a responsible beverage service pass, license, what do you want to call it? And we're regulated by the ABC. And part of this class is we have to sit and go through all of the rules and regulations that the ABC has that says we are legally responsible for if we overserve someone. We are responsible to say, I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald, I think you might have had a little bit too much. May I offer you a glass of water? But I can't serve you any longer. And this is our job. We don't just pour freely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you may come forward. Please identify yourself. And
Steve Weisiger, 227 First Street West. I lived in this neighborhood since roughly 91, 92. Before Field of Dreams, before the shelter. This is an ecosystem. There's residences here. And the decisions you make will impact that. I don't agree that thrice or half doesn't. Anything you decide makes an impact on this ecosystem, however large or small. I've seen it all. So I want you to think about that when you make these decisions. I see wine tasting use permits to legitimize unpermitted use. While it may not impact us greatly with one decision, we got 2 across the street, we got 2 more buildings that are about the same size that another winery could take. Like, how many before you say, oops, So think about this ecosystem when you make decisions. I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of changes. I've lived them. Even the police station used to have a jail here. All those things impact the residences who are here 24/7. We raise our children here, and I support business. I'm very grateful Walt has survived COVID. That's absolutely wonderful. Every time I drive by, everybody's smiling. I really like the presentation tonight, but I also want you to know there is residential here, including me and where I live and my children. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, I see at this point I'm going to close the public portion and bring it back to the commission for comments, questions, and possible motion.
I have a question for staff.
Please.
Wendy, I was just trying to understand, in the document, in the staff report, there's a listing of the tasting room facilities.
Yes?
Okay, and it has, I can't remember, what number can we go to anyways?
24.
Okay, and I see Three Sticks is not on that list. Is there a reason that that one is not considered to be a tasting room, or?
Only wineries listed in the Plaza Retail Overlay District are on that list.
That wouldn't be in the plaza? Really? How funny. So close. Okay, all right, so it's literally just the plaza. How far off the plaza does it go? Because Walt isn't on the
Yeah,
plaza.
it just goes up to Walt, and then it goes down a little bit through to Broadway.
Okay, all right, thank you for that clarification. And I have a question for the developer, or the applicant, if I can.
Sure.
Okay, and I guess this question is for you. There's a lot of talk about that you generally have 34 people a day. So
31,
why
yeah.
twice as many seats?
It's for the weekends, basically. So a typical visitation today, we had 14 guests. That's pretty much average for what we would see on a weekday in this time of the season. It'll probably spike up a little bit, where we'll see maybe 20 guests Monday through Friday, and then on weekends, that's really what the seating's for. Is for us to capture the crowds. Most of our, I would say 55% of our traffic comes Saturday and Sunday.
So on Saturday and Sunday, what's your typical number of
It
guests?
varies, but it's typically about 65 to 70 is what we would call
Total
a
for
very
the day.
successful Saturday afternoon. And so if you think about the way that we seat, we're open for 6 hours or 7 hours on Saturdays. So we'll see, the first tranche of about 20 show up between 11 and 12:30, and then we'll seat another group at 1 o'clock, and they'll go till about 2:30, and then we'll seat the final groups, and then sometimes we'll have some walk-ins that'll happen in between.
So if you only had half as many seats, but you have the turnover, wouldn't that work?
No, because what we need to be doing is, so I mentioned we operate like a restaurant, right? So half of our tables might be unsat, and we're seating people. And so then we need to, we don't have seatings in the way I described specifically. So there'll be, every 15 minutes we'll have a reservation. And then we'll be able to fill those seats with walk-ins also. So we're holding some space so that we can actually capture walk-in traffic, because typically about 55% again of our traffic is members. So that doesn't give us a chance to see new people. Those people are largely just coming in, have an experience. If you visited with your members, you're with friends who are members, they come in, they have a tasting. Doesn't give us a chance to sell new wine club memberships or find new customers. So we need to keep that space open and available so that we can seat those guests should they come in what we would call like a surge position. And so that's typically why we also need them for events. And so when we host events, which happen infrequently, but we do host them from time to time, we'll need those seats available for that. But we could have as many as, you're right, we could have as many as 50 people on property between the hours of 2 and 3. That's really kind of when we would see that happen. And that's what we need those seats for.
How
if we didn't, we
frequently
wouldn't.
do you do events?
We haven't done an event since 2019, and we're planning to do an event next year. In the past, when it wasn't COVID, we would typically host about one a quarter, and in those cases, we'll fill up those seats pretty quickly, but we're also using a shorter day. So we're usually starting the event around noon, ending it around 3 o'clock, and so we kind of get the surge all at once. And so we need those seats for that reason, so. Yeah.
Thanks.
It would, just from a financial perspective, you'd take about half the revenue off the board.
Okay, thank you.
Comments, questions?
Well, I'll start. I don't have this completely thought through. It seems that the front yard seating is we're really talking about 16 seats, 8 that have been referred to as a porch, but only a few people have a memory of anyone ever sitting there. But it sounds like at least since 2017, they've all been in the yard. Whatever was on the porch before has never been on the porch since. So I kind of find myself thinking, wait a minute, do I really want to reward what was really a blatant violation of what the city told them they could do? When Wendy told them they couldn't be there, even though they excavated it without a permit, they went ahead and did it. That doesn't sit well with me. On the other hand, this isn't law enforcement, but it just leaves an impression about this. I'm concerned about the parking. I understood that if, in fact, we required, well, first of all, that we can require whatever this body decides as a condition of this use permit. So we're not bound to 5 seats just because they have 5 seats, 5 spaces. We are trying to reach a decision that works for them as an existing business, that works for the neighbors. So I guess I don't know what to say about the parking, except that there's not enough. And even if we said no seats in the front yard, which is frankly where I'm leaning, none, they probably still don't have enough parking. But at the moment, that's the way I'm seeing this in terms of impact on the neighborhood, that the front yard seating should not be part of the use permit, and they get all the seats they have in the backyard, which are many, and the seats that are on the inside. And I'd like to hear what my fellow commissioners have to say about the parking.
I actually have a question regarding timing, which is pertinent to this application. We're going to be discussing, I think it's item 7.5, a discussion of parking, which include the standards for wine tasting rooms. What would staff's projection on getting something like that reviewed and approved and turned into an ordinance? What would be your dream projection?
I'm anticipating we're going to have a great discussion this evening, but it will likely be continued and take more than one night. It's a very dense set of code amendments, so I would anticipate this will come back to the commission in September. And so if it gets through in September, then we would looking at October City Council, so it wouldn't be adopted until November.
So even conservatively, you would think that by January 2023, we would have an understanding of what our parking requirements for a wine tasting room would be.
I would think so. I mean, there is flexibility in the wine tasting use permit ordinance. It does say that no outdoor seating is allowed unless approved by the use permit. So there is a substantial amount of discretion.
Thank you.
If I could tie on to that a little bit, it feeds into the conversation a little bit. At the City Council meeting a couple weeks ago, we presented an administrative draft downtown parking study. So we are working on looking at a solution for the whole downtown very holistically. We've been having ongoing discussions with state parks about the Casa Grande lot. Part of the parking amendments that are coming forward would create a parking benefit district. That would create a downtown pool so we can look at all the different demands for parking and better manage it, having public-private partnerships. So there's a lot of solutions to the downtown parking program that we are working on. And so the number of parking spaces is really just one tiny component. We all want a really lively, vibrant downtown area. We want to support our businesses. We don't want to put handcuffs on their ability to be a successful business. We just need to work collaboratively to find creative solutions.
When would you anticipate the parking improvement district being approved?
The parking district is in the set of parking code amendments this evening, so similar timing. We're anticipating that would hopefully be in effect in November. The administrative draft of the parking management plan was reviewed by City Council, and we are hoping to bring the draft and have a public review draft in September. So we'll be doing a 30-day review period and have 3 different tiers of solutions to choose from, ranging from additional bike parking and signage to employee parking program, trying to get our employees that work downtown on the plaza to use the less utilized parking spaces. And it's been in the paper. We're of course looking at paid parking at some point in time, mostly due to the state. The state's going to be going to a paid parking program, so that's actually a consideration for these businesses when that Casa Grande lot goes to paid parking sometime in the next 6 months. That's probably going to be a bigger impact on parking to our downtown area than just the tasting room. This is not it's a cumulative issue. It's not any one business that's creating the problem.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill.
So the place I'm starting is that we have a non-conforming use permit. The ordinance that was established in 2019 doesn't allow an enlargement of a non-conforming use permit except by granting a use permit. The ordinance that we grant the use permit by, as Christina just mentioned, does not allow outdoor seating as a condition of approval. So then the question is, does the Planning Commission, via this use permit, allow outdoor seating? For me, there isn't a use permit on this property. The seats that are on this property have not been permitted. The reason that the City Council made this ordinance is actually to bring some conformity to this use within the city via the development code. It was being treated simply as a commercial use when tasting rooms were allowed to go into commercial uses. Their parking loads were much the same as whatever any retail use would be, and then rather than it turning over, it became a spot and a use where patrons lingered. Became more quasi, it's not a restaurant, but similar in terms that patrons stay. They don't rotate quickly, as was anticipated originally that wine tastings rooms would rotate quickly. So for me to jump from 0 to 52 in granting a use permit is a pretty steep hill, even though they have them. And that, to me, was, in my opinion, was the reason that the City Council established this ordinance, and why in the ordinance there is no outdoor seating allowed, is because there was and is no outdoor there's no parking for outdoor seating in the commercial zone. It only is triggered when it's a restaurant use, and then it's 25%. You're allowed 25% of the indoor seats, but it still has a parking load. And so, I think it's backwards for us to approve a use permit with this amount of variance from the ordinance. I think it's not by code allowed for us to enlarge this non-conforming use without a use permit. That's the rub. And so I'm having a really hard time making the findings that would allow me to do this in any fashion, quite honestly, when I go through them. One of the primary sections of 1951-20A, number 4, says that the use is consistent with the intent of this section. And when you go through, the intent of the section is to allow for wine tasting, but also to require it to be conforming to the place in which it's being put. And the reason the City Council established this ordinance is there was becoming conflict at the edges. and in the mixed neighborhoods where it was going into, as well as through concentration on the plaza. So they limited the number. They made an ordinance that required a use permit by the Planning Commission so that those specific conditions could be evaluated. And I don't think that because they have 50 seats is a reason to grant 50 seats under this new ordinance. I know that the applicant doesn't want to hear that, but for me, it's the granting of a use permit. It's not the applicant that I'm granting the use permit to. It's the land that I'm granting the use permit to. And when I see the non-conforming uses of similar type in the surrounding neighborhood, if they want more, they're going to ask for more via the use permit process. And so it's unfortunate that they're one of the first in this case, but that's the way I'm seeing it. I'm certainly not of the mind to allow the additional use up front. And I'm also a little disturbed by the fact that the property essentially is improved when it's a pending application, because for whatever reason, I guess because they want to seat people in the front, ABC requires them to have the improvements. Therefore, they put the improvements in prior to getting the approval because they want to sit people in front. It's backwards. They haven't got the use permit to put people in the front. Therefore, they shouldn't even be worried about the ABC because they shouldn't be sitting people in the front. So, it's a tough one, but that's kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm willing to listen, but I'm having a hard time crossing the bridge.
Well, my thoughts are similar to the two other commissioners have spoken. I'm concerned about the conformity of the project, the fact that our ordinance doesn't allow for outdoor seating, particularly outdoor seating in the front. But generally speaking, I'm supportive of the wine tasting room, the adaptive reuse of a contributing building or buildings to the historic district. They are essential and important to the vibrancy of our downtown. So I don't want to suggest that they're not a welcome use, because they are. They're important and they're vital to the fabric of our downtown. My feeling is I would not necessarily support the outdoor seating in the front, but I do have an idea. And the reason why I was asking those questions about the timing of the parking requirements and the downtown district parking district will all be coming before us in the foreseeable future, I consider, the foreseeable future. So we have a couple of things that we could do. One is we could continue this discussion until that is resolved by the city. That would still fall under the alfresco requirements. I believe you were saying it would be February of 2023?
Currently, the alfresco program continues until April 1st,
So April
2023,
1st.
so all of the outdoor seating would be permitted until that time.
So we would still not be impacting the applicant during that time frame while we're doing our own review of parking and our parking district. And consequently, the result of the parking district may encourage the city or have us rethink outdoor seating generally for outdoor or for wine tasting rooms, because we may have a better handle on parking. So my feeling is that we could do one of two things: continue this item until we believe that there is a resolution of parking in our parking district, and two, also we may revisit the wine tasting regulations themselves. And so my feeling is that we could approve the use permit with conditions, but not the outdoor seating in the front until such time we feel comfortable that's permitted. I also have ideas about the use exactly with respect to the number of events per year. Now, the applicant said they haven't had one since 2019. I'm hoping that our economy improves and we should consider creating a number of events per year, for example, and then also establishing some sort of parameters for us restricting tents or covering of the outdoor area in the back. I think that would be consistent with other use permits that we've approved. So that's kind of how I'm going and leaning towards.
Through the chair, could I just make a couple clarifications?
Please.
The wine tasting regulations state that no outdoor seating is permitted unless specifically allowed in the wine tasting use permit, and that is what the commission is reviewing tonight. And I'd also like to note that the regulations say that invitation-only functions shall be limited and shall occur no more frequently than 26 times per calendar year and no more than 2 times per week, or otherwise specified in the wine tasting use permit. Thank you.
So the question would be if that is excessive or adequate, and my recommendation would be to approve outdoor seating in the back as part of a use permit if we were to go that way. But my suggestion is to delay looking at it until we resolve our parking requirements.
Another option to consider, which we've done in similar circumstances, is to approve it for a year and then bring the use permit back for review. And at that point in time, we would have hopefully our regulations settled. The seating can be there till April already, so April, May, June, July, August. That's only 4 months difference.
Okay.
So I'm going to echo some of the comments already made, and that non-conforming issue is just one that I'm struggling with as well. If we were to treat this like a restaurant, I believe that 25% of the indoor seats could be used outdoors, which would mean 7 seats, which is not what you guys are asking for. I actually think that Commissioner McDonald's proposal is in your best interest to continue with your non-conforming use until we can get clarification on what's going to happen with the al fresco program, what's going to happen with the parking strategy. And I think if we're going to continue that, we do have to have clear confirmation about what we mean by the number of outdoor seats. Personally, I love the seats out front. I think that's really cool, but we have to follow the code and see where that's going to take us. But I think it's important to make it conforming as quickly as possible. But if you want to continue in the non-conforming use as you have been operating and wait till these other issues get resolved, it's going to make it a lot clearer. Because right now, what you're asking for, we're not going to be able to deliver. And so the answer is going to be no. So my recommendation is going to be patient and allow us to work through this process. Thank you.
Go ahead.
A question for staff. If it sounds like the al fresco thing is going to continue to live through April.
It depends if you were watching the council meeting last night, so it's a little bit up in the air.
Well, let's just say that it doesn't go away at the end of October, and it continues for some time thereafter. So if we said, okay, you can have this use permit, but no front yard seating, they could still put people there under the al fresco for as long as that's alive. So we really have sort of shot ourselves in the foot. If we say, no, we're denying this permit, come back later when we know what the regulations are, they could continue with the front yard seating under the al fresco program, which is turning to be quite a formidable force. So there's really no scenario by which anything we do tonight is going to prevent them from having front yard seats for as long as the al fresco program is still breathing. Is that the case?
That's correct.
I don't like being in that position. And
I don't know what the solution to that is. Maybe the solution is to deny this without prejudice, let them come back when we have regulations and they get, through the largesse of the alfresco program, they get what they want in the meantime. But knowing that it's probably not going to look like that down the road.
Through the chair, if the desire of the commission is to deny the application, we'd need to come back at a future meeting with the findings to deny the project.
Yeah, and then I would just suggest another alternative would be to conditionally approve it based on the indoor seats and a reasonable amount of outdoor seats. We do have a limited number of wine tasting use permits, and so at some point we're going to hit that 24th. So it might be in their best interest to lock in one of those permits.
You're saying, look, hypothetically, we could say, we're going to approve this with whatever we decide on the outdoor seating for a period of 1 year, and then we're going to look at it again. And in that point, we may be we'll be out of al fresco and we'll be hopefully have some regulations. Is that?
That's one option.
If I can just chime in through the chair, can you hear me?
Sure.
Hello.
This is David Ruderman, Assistant City Attorney. The wine tasting use permit runs with the land, according to our ordinance. So approving it for a year would be somewhat problematic in that we'd have to record that condition such that it's time limited. So that it makes it a little more difficult, but not impossible.
Thank you, David. Bill?
I have a third option, I think. And that is that we approve this wine tasting permit with only indoor seating. They will be allowed to use, obviously, the outdoor seats like we know through the al fresco process. That'll get them to hopefully April, when the new things have been resolved, and at that point they can apply for a new use permit to allow outdoor seating. Parking will be established, numbers of however the tally goes will be established, and they can ask for it at that point.
Good idea.
I'd like to speak. I've been waiting. So, no, I appreciate all the dialogue, and I think that the discussion needs to continue. I've struggled with this one significantly because I've tried to understand both the context, the setting, what currently is being used, how it's being used, what's across the street, the relationship to the plaza, and just what I've observed in terms of the number of times I've driven by. I tend to believe with one of the individuals in the audience that this tasting room is not the parking problem, per se, in the sense that I think that because of the patterns and the fact that we haven't created anything different in terms of a parking program, that I've observed that, you know, people that get the parking spaces are the ones that get to work and early, and it's unfortunate, but I don't think whether we deny this or approve it, that it really is going to have a significant change in the parking. I have been passionately involved in this topic that is somewhat akin, and that's this topic of parklets for the past too many months. And what I've been told constantly is the joy and the wonder and the delight of eating outside. And I also say that we had the joy and the wonder of eating outside before COVID, but somehow there has been this idea that we need to eat outside on the asphalt, and it just bothers me. So I'm hoping like heck al fresco is going to come to a crashing halt sooner than April 1st. That's my bias. I don't have a vote on it, but I'm quite passionate about sharing my bias to those that do have a vote. Which brings me back to the actual setting. I recognize we are in a area that if you step back and you look at the house, it reads overall as a residence. One could argue that the scale of the sign is too much, but if you kind of squint and you look beyond, it's still a residence. And we have two across the street, of which I know at least one. In fact, they both had seating of some sort. They, forgive me if it's Hawkers, they have front seating. I asked for forgiveness before I blew it. They have outdoor seating now. And right next door, there was a lonely seat sitting there, which I know they had, I think, 16 seats in the back. So I think that there is merit in offering up an outdoor eating experience. I happen to think that that maybe unpermitted, al fresco blessed at this point seating configuration, I can see where it has merit. And what really bothers me on this project is that I can't wrap my head around the idea of this kind of small, quaint parcel garage needing 80 seats. I don't care where they are, whether they're inside, outside, whatever. And that's where I'm pulling back, because what I see there is that tends to intensify the use, or at least it projects the idea or the potential of intensification. And to me, that's one of the things we really do need to take into consideration as we evaluate this and try to figure out what is the best use possibility. So, as I was listening to the applicant and knowing in the description that they would like the ability to have 26 special events, well, that's kind of a time in which I could probably see the use of possibly 80 seats, albeit it would be crowded, but that makes sometimes for a more interesting experience. But I don't want to support the quantity of seats based upon an infrequent special event. I wouldn't mind seeing somehow possibly having the ability to grant a special one use permit specific for a special event, whether it's a members gathering or whatnot. But it's hard for me to envision that density of flow, and albeit I understand the applicant has a certain way of offering up more than just a wine tasting, and I can appreciate that. But my mind says this intensification is what really is kind of a bother to me right now. There is an existing wine facility that is down the road that has a fairly large open courtyard area that is used quite a bit. And to me, there is kind of a tipping point between what I think is appropriate outdoor use in terms of numbers, and when it begins to say, what's going on there type thing, it just seems to be a little bit out of balance for the setting. So I'm prepared for further discussion, because I would love to see a more complete, thoughtful front design that has a limited number of tables. I think in a drought year that we have and may continue, this could be a perfect opportunity to demonstrate some, creative landscape, including taking out the dead grass, or soon to be dead grass, which doesn't look particularly good in anybody's front yard, including mine. Again, parking, they have apparently 5 dedicated spaces, which is probably, as expressed, more than other uses. So I'm struggling, I'm trying to be creative and figure out how we can kind of package this up, but do it in a way that we have respect to the neighborhood. We're not either allowing or giving the perception of an intensification of use. And again, realizing that what I keep hearing out on the streets is just this wonderment of eating outdoors, and even tasting wine outdoors is an experience that I like. I haven't experienced it there, but I think that it has some value. And again, I recognize that this is Sonoma Valley. Our one big attraction is the wine industry, and I like it. So I would like some further discussion in how we can best go forward, and if it's putting off or kicking the can down the road, which I hate that expression, because I think we need to deal with things in a timely fashion. But again, this is not easy, because it is it has the potential to have more negative impact. But I'm hoping that we can come up with some design that would limit that. So there's my 2 cents.
Can I go over the options that we've all discussed? Kind of, maybe I might have missed one. So one is to deny the project, but we would have to come back and make findings for denial. So we'd have to continue it to deny it. The second would be to approve the project, but only with seats that are indoors. That would be consistent with the current requirements. The other is to continue to a date uncertain. We would assume that we'd have a better understanding of parking in the downtown district and our policies as we move forward. The other is to approve the project but without front yard seating. And the last would be to approve the project as proposed. So, so there's 5 options. And I don't know where everybody is on. I mean, I know where you are. I know where you are. I don't know where. I don't know where it was.
I'm right here.
I know where you are, but so, and if there's any other hybrid of that, I have no idea of it.
Well, that's why they pay us the big bucks. Bill?
I still believe that approving this with indoor seating and allowing them to come back after things have been resolved, I agree with you. I don't think 80 seats are appropriate, or 72, or whatever the number is. I think 50 is not appropriate for this property. And I agree with you about the property that's around the corner that is often occupied fully in its front yard, that in against a residential neighborhood, directly against it, is one of the reasons why this ordinance was put in place. And so either we respect what the city council did prior, which is what we're supposed to do, and abide by this ordinance, or we don't. We're making up the rules as we go. And what I would like to be able to do is approve a project that is based on what's going to happen in the future. Right now we have an ordinance that is trying to define what's going to happen in the future. I can't make the leap to approve this project the way that it's currently designed. I don't necessarily want to deny it, but it's hard for me to say I want to approve it. And it's hard for me to get to a number by pulling it out of the air, because 4 months down the road we're going to have parking standards that may be completely inappropriate for having approved that. And so, you know, I know it's an encumbrance, but it's also an opportunity, quite honestly, for us to do the right thing, and it still allows them to come back in the future and ask for a certain number within the confines. You know, 26 events a year, up to 2 per week, 2 weeks per month, is intense. Sorry, that's a lot of activity, special activity in a neighborhood which is going to be concentrated during the best months of the year. Because what we've heard is those 50 people are going to be outside at the tables that are being requested. So you're not going to do that in December. You know, I was fortunate enough to move to this community when that was a house, and it was occupied by a woman who operated a store just below where I lived on the plaza. Things were different then. The plaza closed at the end of January, except for a couple of restaurants, and then it didn't open back up until March. I'm glad that it's not that anymore. But you know, so that's it. That's all.
I have a question about fees. So if we were to approve a project, it could reapply and pay new fees, or we can continue a project where they don't necessarily have to pay new application fees. Is that
correct?
So there is the fee thing to consider. I mean, I don't want to have the applicant pay more fees if it's avoidable.
What are we talking about in fees? I mean,
25 bucks.
no, it's a couple $100. What are the fees for this? 1900.
That's enough to make a consideration.
Okay.
question for the city attorney. If we did a condition of approval to review it in a year, would that be a new application then if they modified the use permit at that point?
A condition of approval to review this in a year?
Yeah, we've done that.
That wouldn't trigger a new application.
So then maybe that would be a way to save them the fee.
Yeah, the problem then is that you still have something that's running with the land, so
yeah,
you would have to record something to release that if there was a denial.
Oh, in a year, you mean? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Bill, go back and once again express right now your best recommendation as far as under the circumstances, the timing, what I believe you want to approve indoor seating only. And then in the meantime, between now and I'll be a little less optimistic by the middle of next year.
Could you speak closer to the mic, please? I can't hear that.
Sure. All right. We approve the project for indoor seating only in terms of use permit. That we are forecasting in the foreseeable future, will be by June, that we have a number of these other ducks lined up so that it provides clarity for what's happening down there. Then it would give the client or the applicant the opportunity at that point, once it has been identified what the new parameters are, they could then make the decision how they could best come forward with a new application for the principally outdoor dining, and do it in a way that might just be more clear.
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
Just so that we all are on the same page, if the permit were to allow a less intensive use than what is currently being used, the applicant could simply not exercise that permit and continue to operate as it's currently operating in a non-conforming status.
Is that by virtue of al fresco or irrespective of al fresco?
By virtue of the ordinance, the wine tasting use permit ordinance, what was in operation prior to 2019, if that included all of the outdoor in the back dining, that could continue, and the 8 seats in front would be subject to continuation of the al fresco program.
The 16 seats in front, because
there are currently, I understand, 8 seats in front, and this application is requesting an additional 8 for a total of 16.
No, they're using them all in the front yard right now. Have been for the whole al fresco period.
That would be subject.
Have been since 2017. Yeah, but okay. So if we, what? Could you clarify the point? If we approved it for a lesser intense use, like indoor only, they could continue by virtue of al fresco to continue operating just as they are until that expires. And then are you saying at the end of that, they could go back to whatever it is they were doing that was non-conforming? The legal non-conforming?
They could opt instead to just continue their non-conforming use as it currently exists, notwithstanding the al fresco, removing the al fresco portion.
Okay. I think there's a difference of opinion among those in this room as to what the scope of the previous non-conforming use was, particularly with respect to the seats on the porch and those in the front yard. But I think we would still have some ambiguity on that point. But
correct, but I believe there wasn't as much ambiguity about the seats in the back. Is that correct?
So can staff give us any clarity on that? So if we're wanting to look at the lens of what was what was approved in a non-conforming use prior to the alfresco. Specifically, what was it? How many seats were in the back? How many seats were the front? How many seats were inside?
Yes, so there's been no approval for any type of wine tasting use on the property. Historically, they've had 44 outdoor seats, 8 on the front porch, 36 in the back, and 28 indoor seats.
Okay. So we have 72 seats. So in essence, they can not exercise or the use permit that we were talking about, and they have 72 seats. And the only thing that would not be allowed after the alfresco program, which hopefully is going away soon, will be no seats in the front. Allowed on the front porch, nothing in the front, and outdoor seats in the back. And we live with that for whatever the applicant chooses to come back, possibly with another proposal. Am I missing anything, David? From a legal standpoint? I mean, if I've heard you correctly? To say
Yes.
that not sure how this helps anybody, unfortunately.
No, it doesn't. It's surprising to me that this thing isn't sunset as a legal non-conforming use. Is there anything, I mean, because the whole point of the city adopting this ordinance and the conditional use permit was to legitimize these uses. And so what I hear you saying is they only choose to legitimize them if the people want to expand them. Otherwise, they can just continue as they were. That's pretty much it, right?
There's no sunset provision in the ordinance other than for abandonment of the use. So I think it's 60 days. If 60 continuous days goes by and it's not being used as a wine tasting room, then they lose that that status as a legal non-conforming use.
Okay, I'm open to any more thoughts.
Well, I don't think that changes regardless of the number of seats. If we were to approve 5 seats out in front or 500 seats, their option doesn't change. So I think the body needs to take the action that the body needs to take or decides to take. It's up to the applicant whether they accept to have a use permit, a real use permit now under the current law, or they want to operate as a non-conforming use. That's every non-conforming use's decision. Under a non-conforming use, you can't expand your business.
But you can keep it going the way
But you
it
can
is.
keep it going.
So if we adopted what I first proposed, namely no front yard seats, that's effectively what they have now and can continue to do forever, apparently.
And in essence, doesn't conform with the current ordinance.
Yes, so
I have a question for staff. So Christina and Wendy, you mentioned that the value to the applicant in getting a use permit is that they will have one of the 24 in case other people end up applying and getting there. So if they continued forever and they ended up not being eligible for a use permit, they could still continue to operate as a non-conforming business forever, right?
Yes.
So the whole point of getting the use permit at this point is to allow the expansion of that outdoor seating.
Right.
So, and I think none of us are comfortable with the increased number of seats, indoors, outdoors, whatever. It's just not going to work. And we're not comfortable with large events there because that space doesn't handle it. So I think right now it's really up to the applicants which way they want to go. Do they want to get a use permit that approves the indoor seats, or do they want to keep operating as a non-conforming business?
The only comment I will make to that is in looking at amendments to the wine tasting use permit, we will likely be looking at the non-conforming status. The way that it's written now is making it challenging or very rare that there are non-conforming businesses. The intent of the ordinance was to bring all of the businesses into compliance, so I could see that changing at some point in the future.
One other question.
Sure, that's fine.
So, in terms of the 25 permitted tasting rooms in this district? 24. Okay. If they don't have a use permit, could they lose their place on that? Do they still qualify as one of the 24, or do they not qualify if other people come along, get use permits, and come in?
Right, if other wine tasting businesses came in and got the wine tasting use permit, they could still operate as a non-conforming wine tasting room.
So they'd be number 26 or 25, you're saying? Which is counter to what we were trying to do.
No, I'm sorry, once there's 24 legal and permitted combined, then no more new ones can be, no new permits can be issued.
Okay. But their status as being one of the 24 is preserved whether they're get a use permit or don't.
Yes, provided they continue to use continuously.
That's the problem with the ordinance. There's no incentive to come into compliance.
This applicant is the first
Please.
one.
So this is my incentive. I'm glad you've had this conversation. It's been really interesting listening to the land law. 26 events is egregious. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that was written in the 2014 ordinance. We've never hosted more than 5. So I just want to make that very clear and reassuring that we're not going to be hosting a rave on First Street. We're also limited in the use permit that we're applying for in time when we do host events and making sure that we have those events over by 9:30. But you are correct. What I'm offering the commission is the opportunity to codify this tasting room facility. I'm asking for the alfresco area to be permanent through the use permit process. And if you deny that, then I go back to conforming use, and to your point, we impact the day just like we impact the day every day for the last 13 years, right? We wouldn't change. Our parking standards wouldn't change. Our guest counts wouldn't change. When alfresco ends, we would pack up the front. We would put all those tables back in the back, because we actually haven't expanded any of our tables. We've just moved them all around. We haven't added any new tables yet. So we would just put them in the back, and we would operate as normal. So that's the incentive for the applicant to come to this commission, is that I'm asking for this new piece. And we could come back and we could say we want the same thing that we have right now, but there's no incentive for us to do that. So I just want to be very honest with you that that's actually what we're trying to do. And then secondarily, I just want to make sure you understand, we've been trying to do a landscape plan for the dead grass, and we've held it up because we do have a lot of neighbor scrutiny, and we didn't want to dig anything or touch anything until we had a chance to meet with you.
So let me ask this question. I think, at least I've been quite expressive in terms of concerned about the perception of intensity when you're talking about 80 seats.
Yes.
And although I've never taken the opportunity to indulge and come and watch and see how you service your visitors, is there a number that you would consider, a smaller number that you could see that would not impact the way you do things so negatively that it would just, prevent you from being successful? Again, I'm just going back from just the sheer numbers, having looked at the scale of the building, the scale of the front.
So there's a couple of things. You're right. I invite all of you to come. I'm glad you've had a chance to enjoy it. I hope you had a great time. I think that in terms of asking any business to shrink their opportunity, that's a tough bill for any business to take on. I think if you're asking about how we could creatively, so for instance, parking, we've talked a lot about parking. I know Senator Dodd. I've been very vocal with Senator Dodd that he needs to get his guy that's in the Sonoma Valley to engage with the city to fix the parking problem. The dog bone that lives in the Casa Grande parking lot, that dead weed dog bone, I've designed parking lots. I've applied for and been granted use permits in Sonoma County. That is the worst parking lot design I've ever seen in my life. Like it's kind of appalling. So I've been very vocal with him that needs to either get fixed, amended, or leased to the city and allow you guys to go about it.
Let's go back. I'd like
but you were saying.
Yeah, let's go back to the numbers though, because again, if I've understood how the operation is, Monday through Friday, you average 31 plus or minus. It could be difference depending upon if we're in harvest time or so on. So I understand that. But what I don't understand is
dead of winter 9
is how you could not fluctuate some. In other words, I can't believe if you only had 50 seats in your wine tasting facility that people would say, I don't want to come anymore. I don't think that's why they come to your wine tasting, because I believe you put out a very good product. So I don't quite understand the logistics of why we couldn't.
Let me take a stab at a metaphor. So has anybody been to Lake Tahoe? Has everyone sat at Jake's on the Lake? So Jake's on the Lake is a big outdoor patio that exists only in the spring and summer months, right? That use permit that they have to operate on the patio allows them a certain number of seats to be on that outdoor patio. But the reality is that use permit is only actually ever committed or used in its full amount during the season when they have outdoor seating. And so they need to be able to do that. They need to be able to go in and out. And the way land law works is you either give it all to them or you give very little to them. We don't get the benefit of this kind of accordion ability to adjust with seasonality throughout the week or throughout the weekend, because the way land law is written, you either give it to me or you don't. And that's how I understand land law. So for that reason, it would be difficult for me to carve how we restrict seating and what our maximum potential would be, because I can't tell you what the accordion needs to be.
David, can you comment on the land law? Is that a correct interpretation? All or nothing?
No, it's not. Generally, the way they teach it to us in law school is property rights are a bundle of sticks, and you can remove 1 stick, 2 sticks, 3 sticks, 4 sticks, 5 sticks. The Planning Commission, the city has land use authority with respect to uses, and so it can condition uses based on zoning, location, etc. And that's what you're here to do.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for the applicant? Well, he's...
I just also wanted to clarify that we took there was no seating between the time that Wendy emailed me and the time that alfresco occurred, except for the 8 seats on the patio. I know that there's a lot of...
The 8 seats that used to be on the porch that were then on the patio.
So we kept them on the porch the day that we moved everything off that area that we were authored administrative use, whatever that was, legal or not legal, it was not my decision to make. But the minute we got an email from planning, we took everything back to the porch and we took everything back to the back patios. And we did not operate on it throughout that period of, which is really 2018. I think it was March 7th or January 7th, 2018, through the authorization of the alfresco program. So we did not use that 300 square foot area that we're asking for expansion to through the vehicle of this use permit in that period. I just want to be very clear, because I was trying to apply for something. So it would have been a very bad idea for me to be using something that I was applying for, because I had a use permit application that was submitted on October 3rd, 2017. And so if I was going to be in violation, or if I was going to be caught, or if code violations were going to come to me, I would have written that off, right? Because you guys would have all denied me because I was not a good citizen of Sonoma County. So I just want to make sure everyone understands we took that very seriously.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at a picture dated January 2018 that has tables.
What was the date of that?
January 2018.
What was the date in January?
11th.
Okay, so then I would love to go back to my emails and make sure that I have the date, because I do know That the minute that Wendy asked us to remove the tables, we removed the tables, and it's very close to the date that I remembered in my head just now.
Okay.
So it's within 4 days, is what I'm trying to say. So I would love to see a picture on February 1.
I don't have one.
I know. And I would love for Jim Behar to meet with me to give me that information that he promised to give me. So.
Okay. All right. Well,
Let's, we'll bring it back to the
Thank you.
commissioners.
thank you.
It's okay.
Well, why don't we make a motion to approve it with only indoor seats, and then the applicant can make their own decision if they pull a permit for that or they continue on a non-conforming use.
Is that a motion?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Barbos,
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Willers,
Yes.
and Chair Wellender.
Yeah.
Thank you. The motion passes.
I'm sorry.
To allow them to obtain a wine tasting use permit with only indoor seating.
But you understand that during the al fresco era, it will continue just as it is today.
And we'll continue a non-conforming use
Yes.
the way that we were in the past. So.
Yes. Then they can retreat back to the non-conforming use.
It's a very
Intensity.
strange law.
Heck of a deal.
Non-conforming uses.
But they have a use permit.
No.
No.
They can choose to obtain the use permit.
Oh, I see.
We have approved a use permit, so they can choose
This is a
to
weird
get
one.
the use permit, or they can choose not to.
They have the use permit, you just approved it. So they have a use permit
Oh,
for
okay.
indoor
Yes,
seating
that's
only.
what- It's a use permit with no outdoor seating,
A wine tasting use permit for indoor seating only.
and it runs with the land in perpetuity.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
They have to exercise it though. So they would have to remove their seats outside. Take concrete steps to implement the permit for it to,
After al fresco.
It'll
No?
expire.
Okay. Okay. So, I'm sorry, would you repeat that to make sure the client is, the applicant is clear? Because I don't want anyone to leave with misunderstanding.
is that for me, Chair Owner?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I would refer the applicant or the conditional permit use holder to section A7. A wine tasting use permit shall be exercised within 1 year from the date of approval, or the permit shall be become void unless an extension is provided in compliance with blah, blah, blah.
Come forward, please.
I'm kind of confused about what I need to do.
And that's why we don't want you to leave yet.
So yeah, so I'm confused with what I just got. So from what I understand, we've now codified a use permit for the property at 380 First Street West. The codified permit, as long as the codified permit is a use permit for indoor use only. But since I'm living in non-conforming use and I demonstrated use before, I can continue on as it was today in perpetuity, as long as I don't remove any seating inside and I don't remove any seating outside and I don't vacate the property for more than 60 days.
And I'll defer to our counsel to confirm.
Yeah, that's
correct.
As you know, I am counsel for the city of Sonoma, therefore I cannot give you legal advice.
No, but I'm asking.
However, I will inform you
Determination.
that you've got 3 options.
Okay.
One is to appeal to the city council. The second one is to begin removing outdoor seating in compliance with the permit that is going to be issued. And in doing so, you will then have a use permit that runs with the land, but only within the parameters that were granted. And your third option is to not do anything, essentially, to exercise the permit and let the permit expire such that you can continue your non-conforming use as it existed when the ordinance was adopted in 2019.
Got it. So basically, if I don't do anything now through the next year, then the use permit that you just voted on would dissolve. We would go back to this potentially under potentially new codified regulations.
Something that would be clearer that we can all put our arms around and understand and hopefully take some action on.
Got it. So, but if I don't do anything, I'm in option 3. I just want to make sure that's clear. Okay.
And also, just for clarification, the additional 8 outdoor seatings in front after al fresco, if nothing is done by the applicant, would have to be removed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm clear on that. I just wanted to understand what the 3 different, I think we're all coming together now. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. I know that was a long time. I know that was a lot of mind bending. I hope to see you all for a glass of wine later.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Are we good to continue?
Well, till 10.
That's right. Let's go through the.
Wow, that was a mind. That was
school with Liz?
Yeah, so I'm a couple years older than her. I graduated in 99. So I think she's 2000, 2001.
Go 719. I drive about once every 3 weeks now. Let's see, from 1980 to 2010, summer every day.
Born and raised, my parents still live over by Arnold Drive.
On which drive?
Arnold Drive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're right next to Alton.
Oh, yeah.
Bought their land for $20,000.
Say again?
They bought their acre of land.
Oh, yes,
$20,000.
Well, just like Jamestown in 1960, it was 25. They teased my father, you paid too much for it. He said, you should have offered Mrs. August 20, and she would have taken it.
It's a really special place.
Well, thank you.
I've got 3 little kids, and it's so wonderful to not have to drive far to have an afternoon of fun.
You know, it's funny because we're persecuted for being the parking authority. But it's all our neighbors that don't have any parking at all. You know, there's that cascade effect.
It's the same thing as downtown. It just, the town's gotten bigger, we're popular, you know?
And you know, that's the thing I see again and again and again. Everything is micro considered.
I think part of it is that common sense has gone out the window. So I don't know, I have seen many times where people will have a stroller and toddlers and a baby, and they're running across Highway 12 like it were.
In fact, I offered to pay for an electric parking crossing the road.
That would be wonderful.
To Mount Berger.
Yeah.
He said, those things are $12,070. He said, well, I'll write you a check for $6,000, 35.
Yeah.
Even though it's over at James, even though, as I say here again and again, the pandemic has run its course, enough demand for this pandemic has run its course. And we have ample parking. But you have kids crossing in front of Jacobs, every day they go to and from school. And we're willing to help with safety.
I wish, there's that space that's the county right of way and Caltrans right of way. I wish they could just figure out a way to put more spaces there.
In fact, when they put up all that orange snow fencing, we thought that was the case.
Yeah.
And in fact, I spoke with the Caltrans.
All right.
We are gonna miss you.
Yeah, when you're up there on the,
Yeah, well, I haven't won anything.
sitting in the big chair.
I haven't won anything.
It could be any of these, Might even be that same spot here.
Can I claim order? Do I need a gavel? Matt, can you share my screen, please?
You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I will try to make this as short and sweet as I can. The current topic, as soon as the screen clicks in, is a pretty isolated round of code amendments to Chapter 1910, Zones and Allowable Uses, Section 1952-030, Concurrent Permit Processing, as well as Chapter 1992, Definitions. So the intent of this package is to streamline housing development. And the direction for this really comes straight from the Planning Commission. So the amendments to 1910 would facilitate permitting of duplexes in low-density residential zoning district. We've had lots of discussions about SB 9, and this would change the zones and allowable uses where currently a use permit is required, and it would eliminate that option. So anyone by right could do construct or create a duplex with a building permit. And similarly, it encourages multifamily housing and medium-density residential zoning and high-density residential zoning by prohibiting single-family residences and duplexes in those zoning districts. And the modifications to the concurrent streamline processing, right now the language is a little ambiguous, and it basically, we would skip design review and go straight to the Planning Commission for concurrent applications. So here are the tables. You can just see these are really straightforward, deleting the use permit, putting in a P principally permitted for a duplex. And for single family residence, gosh, I hate it when, see it over here.
You can use your screen.
Oh, or that. Sorry, learning. And so this would outlaw single family residences in RM and RH. And commercial, similar, adding in that single family residences are not allowed, similar to duplexes, because we're really trying to promote multifamily housing, and that is 3 units or more. Same with mixed use. So duplex is not allowed, single family residence is not allowed, except in the case that we have the footnote. So we're changing it from them being allowed with a use permit, that one existing single family residence on an existing legal lot of record would be allowed. Here are the modifications for concurrent processing. So we're taking out to the extent feasible, which is extremely subjective, and adding with the review being the responsibility of the higher decision-making body. So that would eliminate one hearing. It's going to save people a lot of time and money, and hopefully help get some housing projects through quickly. So for definitions, we've had this weird gap. So a duplex meant a residential structure under a single ownership containing 2 units. So if there was a condo with 2 units, it fell between the cracks of a duplex and a multifamily. And there's a lot of superfluous information in our current definition of multifamily, so we're just simply saying it's a structure containing 2 or more dwelling units. So after discussion tonight, the process would be to, if the Planning Commission desires, would be for council to discuss and introduce the ordinance on September 12th. Could be potentially adopted on October 5th, and it would go into effect 30 days later. Alternatively, if there's amendments, we can bring it back to the Planning Commission in September. I'm available for questions.
Can you go back one slide? Multifamily dwellings are currently 3 or more
Correct.
units.
Well,
You've
but it's
essentially now said that containing more than, okay. I thought
more
the
than
way
2.
you phrased it, you said
Oh,
2 or more.
Sorry, excuse me.
Okay, we're good.
I have a question about legal non-conforming uses. So like in commercial districts and multifamily districts, if there is a single family home and somebody has a house and they want to add a bedroom onto their house, are you saying that they're not allowed to add any floor areas?
In which district?
In, let's say, for example, the commercial district, C district. There's a lot of single family homes in the C district.
That aren't wine tasting?
That are not wine tasting. Some of them are retail, but they could be turned back into residential. I mean, I noticed a number of them even along West Napa.
Yeah, so if they would be legal non-conforming, or if there's direction to have a similar note as in mixed use, that one existing single family residence on an existing lot would be allowed, we could do that as well.
They could continue and expand, but they just can't. They can't.
You couldn't subdivide.
You couldn't subdivide.
And then
That's okay.
have more single families.
I just don't want somebody to be stuck in a situation where they have a residence and they wanted to do a modest addition and they're in a commercial zone.
So in that case, we would potentially want to add a similar footnote that we have for mixed use.
Yes, I would concur and support that.
So we're commenting on the section completely at this point?
Well, yeah.
I'd like to, because this, you want to go to the public?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you, staff, for that very brief report. I'd like to open it up to the public if they wish to come forward. We know who you are, but you're welcome to come back.
Thank you for this fourth privilege, I believe. And I failed to mention I live on Larkin Drive.
Oh, I remember that. No, the first time you came up, you said.
Oh, okay, well, yeah, but anyway, first time this meeting. The reason I mention that is this sounds great in concept, wonderfully expansive, but how does it square with the constraint of water supply, sewage, electricity to the engineers here? Because on Larkin, the pressure is very, very diminished, you know, in the morning. You know, this is not an infinitum, you know, commodities, utilities that we're talking about here. Very, very limited. And that means that there's, you know, the retrofitting, tearing up streets and everything else is going to be, you know, significant. I've wondered about this, and I wonder, how does Sacramento, let's talk about this, how does Sacramento expand infinitum? How does Fresno also expand infinitum? I understand our limitations here based on the shower pressure in the morning. But how do these other communities, Stockton is another example, you know, it's not a multi-story, it's you know, tens of thousands of acres, and yet they keep adding and adding and adding, and I don't get it. Thank you.
We're right there with you. Let me guess. Fred?
No. Caitlin Cornwell would like to speak. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Caitlin, you're welcome.
Just want to say we love this proposed change and are fully in support of it, and thank you for introducing it.
You're most welcome.
That's it.
No, Fred? Can you call him?
Yeah, call him
up. Let's bring it back then to the commission for any more comments about this draft.
We didn't see this part, but there was a part where there was a chart that had, they said 20 acre maximum for, it was a density chart. Are we coming to that?
So we removed that from this draft. It was going to be challenging from getting the ordinance through, and so we've elected to look at density through the housing element process.
Okay.
It was going to be complicated with the residential component, code changes that are going through, and we just wanted to make sure to get this through and not create potential problems.
Okay. We won't comment on our
I'd say
deleted.
that's too bad.
We wanted a minimum on commercial and mixed use, so you could put 20 per acre, but you had to put at least 10.
Yeah, and so where the issues come into play is in a commercial zoning district and the residential component, and so we have a parallel set of code amendments that are going through that are looking at how much residential do you have to have in a commercial as well as mixed use, and so we're trying to be really careful of not having two changes going through that would conflict with each other.
So can a minimum density be introduced via that ordinance?
Potentially.
Okay, because I really believe now that we've removed the waiver possibility.
Yeah, and we can always come back and evaluate densities at another point in time. It's hard right now, so these are amendments to 1910, and the residential component is 1910, and so we just need to be really careful moving two code changes on the same section.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll finish with the commission. We've removed the waiver, or are about to remove the waiver from the code language, which means that you must build housing, whether on or off. And every other one of our zoning ordinances has a minimum density, except for commercial and mixed use. Well, talk about a garage door you can drive a truck through. You conceivably could make a single house on either of those to fulfill your quote unquote, because it has no minimum density. Or you could do very few homes that are of a very large size, because there's no minimum density. And I think to bring our code to equality in our zoning with its intent, that the RH ends at 15, the C and MX should begin at 15. And just like every zone below cascades to the one above. And it to me, it only makes sense. You know, before, yeah, if you were going to waive it, then there was no requirement, so there's no minimum density. But
So
it
what's-
seems odd to me.
Christina, what would be the problem if we went ahead and just did the minimum of 15?
We have not done the staff work and research required to move that stage along and to make sure that there aren't conflicts and potential CEQA issues with changing density and looking at what we're doing with the housing element. So I think that I share the intent. I think the commission has the same intent, but it just requires more time and energy than, we could hold this up. I would, my personal preference would be to push this forward. Let's get the residential component done, and then we can kind of make sure that it gets cleaned up.
So the interesting thing in the housing element is that the housing element assumes via the RENA numbers that a 95% utilization of that 20 units to the acre in the C and MX zone will be established. So it basically is taking the belief to establish the RENA number that we're going to develop at 19 units to the acre. So why would it be a big stretch to say 15 minimum?
I don't think it's a big stretch. I
Yeah.
just think we want to make sure,
No, I
we're
understand.
just being careful and cautious and trying to make progress and where we can.
So we have two avenues, it sounds like. One is we could continue this and Okay. We only have one choice. We're going to move forward. But what I would like to suggest is somehow
You can give us direction to investigate the issue further and bring future code changes to address it.
where I was headed is that sometimes in my history of sitting in one of these chairs is that we do want to go back. If I could steal the phrase of Jan Psaki, we'd like to circle back on that item. I just don't want to forget circling back. So I don't know if there's a list or something that can be part of something that will prick our memory.
It's on our to-do list. Okay. A very long to-do list.
It's on mine too.
Good.
Yeah. I think
But
this
you
is
told me
the.
you said you might.
That's not a threat, it's just on my list.
I think in my head it's don't let perfect be the enemy of good. We're making a good change, and let's not try to make it perfect before we get it passed.
Okay. It's 10 o'clock. Do you need anything from us? 1 second. Do you need anything from us?
A motion.
Okay, I'm sorry. Would you like to speak more time? This is pretty informal.
I was not being facetious those 12 minutes ago. I was being for real. How much sewage capacity is left?
We don't have that answer, but I know that, wasn't it David taking the lead on getting some report with, was it LAFCO?
I mean, if the chair would like, I can make brief remarks about the concerns.
Yes.
So we do planning for sewer water capacity on certain cycles. So we just passed last year our water assessment. So that looks at, I believe, 3 years at a time. And the sewer is done by the Sonoma County Water Agency. So they have their own sewer master plans. And when we do our general plan, we look at build out over 10 years. So we're due to start that process
So
again.
which is more constrained, sewage capacity or water supply capacity?
I don't know.
Or school capacity, or roadway capacity,
School
or
capacity,
electrical
I'm sure.
capacity?
Yeah, I'm sure, we look at all that through our general plan,
Uh-huh.
and we have allocated growth. And we get our arena numbers from the state tells us what we need to build for, so all of I share your concerns about droughts and resources and water and all that.
Well, that would be another aspect,
Yeah,
sure.
correct. No, it's very, very, very valid concerns, and we do need to take a close look as we move forward.
Okay, very good, because how can you contemplate these hundreds and hundreds of units
We plan for
when you're
it.
at capacity in these utilities
Yeah,
now?
we plan for it all.
Thank you. Okay. The request is we need a motion.
I move to adopt 1910
to introduce an ordinance to City Council. There's the numbers.
Okay. I move to make a recommendation to adopt Chapter 19, the revisions to Chapter 1910 and Section 1952-030, as well as 19.92.
I second that.
Further discussion? Matthew?
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Willers?
Yes.
And Chair Wellender?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes unanimously.
So the clock says 10 o'clock in my eyes, and so can we move on to whatever, where am I at?
Oh, we are leaving.
We are close. We just have to have general discussion and, where's my,
Don't we have to continue that next item?
yes, we're gonna continue, yes, I'm sorry, 7.5. We need a motion to continue to some date certain? Okay,
I want to say September 15th.
yes, so can I hear something on that, please?
I make a motion to continue item 7.5 to September 15th.
I second.
Further discussion? Matthew?
Commissioner Barbos?
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yep.
Commissioner Willers?
Yes.
And Chair Wellender?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes
Where
unanimously.
in the world is my agenda?
Oh, it's right here electronically.
No, I lost that. I just want,
Without Larry, we have no eyes here.
okay.
So we're down there, so it's items for discussion.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is, all right, items for discussion. Any items for discussion? Issues update, staff.
None.
Thank you. Comments from the commission?
Where's David Storr?
He's on vacation. He's coming back on the 29th. And somebody else is leaving the planning department for a vacation that I'm jealous of, but we won't tell her name is Wendy, but anyway, have a nice vacation. Comments from the commission? Any more comments? If not, I want a motion to adjourn.
I have two comments. One is I just wanted to follow up on the question I had about all the signs that are posted along Montini Preserve fencing area, to find out if those are legal or if they're bootlegged and should be removed.
I will look into that. I'm sorry. I was supposed to do
Oh,
that
that's
last
okay.
time.
All right.
Thank you.
And then also, I'll be away and won't be able to attend the September meeting.
And nor will I.
Okay.
So I'm just, I mean, I don't know.
No, I'll be here. I'll be here.
Oh, God.
Larry and Matt.
Yeah, they should be.
Will we have a quorum?
We should, if everybody else can be there.
I'll be here.
For those that have nothing more to do, tomorrow morning from 8 to noon, there's going to be the retreat by City Council that's open to, it's a notice, so it's open to public. So if you have interest in knowing what the focus is going to be for the next 90 days and maybe beyond, and if you, yeah,
You'll go.
I guess I am. So, okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So, thank you. This was painful, but it was good. I mean, it was a good discussion.
Thank you to our audience.
It's like a white courtesy telephone
I know.
call
Yeah.
at the airport.